Thank you very much, Cesar. Thank you for the technology staff. We could not do this without you all and the DCA for this location. Um, I'd like to call the meeting of the California Board of Occupational Therapy to order, May 2nd, 2023, at 9:08 a.m., I think it is. Our secretary, Linda Doe, is in transit. She should be here shortly. Vice President Beata Morcos, would you be so kind as to take the roll?
Yes, of course. Denise Miller. Hector Cabrera.
Present.
Christine Wittlisbach.
Here.
Linda Doe, is not here yet. Richard Bookwalter.
Here.
Sharon Pavlovich.
Present.
Beata Morcos here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. We have a quorum. First, I want to thank everyone for coming to our meeting today. Our executive officer is not here. She may be able to come later. The CBOT staff, Jody and Rachel and Austin, Cesar, our technology leader here, David, our remote moderator, and guests, distinguished guests. We are all meeting in person. So we're meeting in person here. We'll have members of the public come and comment. We're meeting via WebEx. And then we also have a webcast happening, and there are cameras around, various cameras around, is my understanding. So we will be broadcast that way. We don't know, can't necessarily see where they are. Board member Sharon Pavlovich is participating remotely. Hi, Sharon. Dr. Pavlovich. And I will periodically be pausing to make sure that Dr. Pavlovich is able to participate in this meeting. We're also going to have public comment after every session, after every agenda item, and we're going to do it because we may have members of the public here in person, and we may also have members of the public by WebEx. We're going to do here and then who's present, and then public comment via WebEx, so that we can make sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak and that it's not confusing about how we do that. So that's the procedure I'd like to follow. The goal, of course, is an open meeting so that everyone can participate and contribute to inform the decision-making process of the board. Also, just the lay of the land today, we are going to have an open meeting and through a hearing at 2 o'clock, a public petition for reinstatement hearing at 2 o'clock, after which we will go into a closed session to deliberate on that case and some additional cases. The end of the day, we will reopen briefly with not do any more business and then adjourn. So before all the way through the reinstatement hearing, it will be public, and then thereafter will be pretty much closed. There won't be a reason to stay, but we do open briefly in open meeting at the end. Because that hearing is a hard start at 2 o'clock, and the petitioner, attorney general, and administrative law judge will all be participating via WebEx, and there could be technology startup time needed. We're going to try, we're also required to break for lunch. So we're going to try breaking for lunch around 12 noon so that we have enough time. The staff requires a lunch by California law. We also have to have a morning break. And then we will come back by 1:30 so that we can make sure we're all set up for that hearing at 2. That's the plan for today. We have a bunch of agenda items. We'll get through as many as we can. I do reserve the right to move agenda items to tomorrow that we may not be able to get to before the lunch break and the hearing and all that. So that's how I plan to proceed today. I believe the bathrooms are down the hall if people need that. Please, board members, if you need a break, signal me, time out, something, so that we can all take, probably if you need one, we all need one. I'll try to remember to build one in. All right, so those are my remarks. That concludes my remarks in item 2. Item 3, board member remarks. I'd like to invite board members to make any remarks pertinent to our meeting.
I have a remark. I wanted to let everyone know on the board, first off, great to see you. Happy May. And I also wanted to let you know that I had the opportunity to fill in for Heather Martin on behalf of our board at Cal State Dominguez Hills with about 80 soon-to-be new graduates to talk about the California Board of Occupational Therapy, how not to violate, how hopefully to only see us at a lecture like that, and everything they need to do to use Breeze. It was really a great turnout. They had a very robust community fair afterwards, and it was a pleasure to be on that campus and see what they are doing in the field of occupational therapy and represent the board.
Thank you. Hector, do you have any comments today or none today? Beata? Christine? Lynn Doe, welcome. So let it be recorded that Lynn Doe has arrived. Do we need to recall the roll or anything like that, or? I don't think so. Yeah.
No, we established a forum.
Yeah, we're fine. We've established the quorum. Welcome. Glad you could make it. That's good. And Sharon, Dr. Pavlovich, do you have any comments?
I do not. Thank you, President Bookwalter.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 4, public comment for items not on the agenda. I'd like to take this time to open the floor to public, people in the public who are here present in the room and offer them an opportunity to comment. You are not obligated to identify yourself, but we would be happy to know who you are. And I recognize, I think the people here, do we? Hi, Jeff. Jeff is a former staff of the board, and we are delighted to see you. It's been a long time. Anyone else care to introduce themselves? No, thank you. Okay. Now I'd like to open to public comment via WebEx.
We are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. For mobile device users, you have 3 different screens and only one of them has a hand button. So you may need to hit the ellipses button. That's the ... at the bottom in order to find your hand button. People will be given 3 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 30-second warning before the end of your time. And as a new feature, we have a visual timer that hopefully you see on the right-hand side of your screen. First, we're going to call on Adabun Horrell. I hope I said that correctly. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Boone Hurl, COTA, and Program Director for the OT Assistant Program at Sacramento City College. And it is a privilege to be here this morning to observe the work of the board, and very appreciative of the multiple access opportunities for participation. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And next, we're going to hear from ODT capstone student. Hold on at just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. My name is Tori. I am a doctoral student at University of Pacific, completing my final capstone project with OTAC, focusing on advocacy and policymaking processes in OT. I'm just here to listen and observe and learn about how the California board works. So I just thank you so much for allowing me to introduce myself. Thank you.
All right, and those are all of our requests for public comment. Do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Please, thank you very much, David, and thank you, Adabun Hurl and Tori, for your comments. At this time, I believe we have our guest also participating remotely for item number 5, which is a presentation by the National Board for Certification in Occupational Therapy. Is Sean Conway and are you presenting with someone? Or are you presenting with someone else?
Yes, good morning, Chair Bookwalter. Thank you so much for having us. I'm co-presenting with my colleague Franchelle Pinetta this morning.
Thank you very much, Sean. We're very much looking forward to catching up on the on the compact examinations, what's going on with NBCOT. Please take it away.
Absolutely. Okay, let's see, Franchelle, you're good to go, and I want to make sure that first of all, we thank you all so much for your interest in receiving an update from NBCOT on national certification programs, policies, and services. As I initially mentioned, I'm co-presenting with my wonderful colleague, Franchelle Pinetta. I'm going to be doing sort of the first section of the presentation, and then Franchelle will be doing one of the sections that pertains specifically to the regulatory community. So I'm delighted to be able to share this presentation with her. And again, we want to thank you for giving us time and space on your agenda. And we also want to give a special shout out to Heather Martin for helping to coordinate this presentation from her end. So we are very appreciative to all of you. So with that said, we'll go ahead and just jump right in here. As I think many, if not all of you know, this is an effort that NBCOT has engaged in for many, many years, whereby we periodically reach out to all occupational therapy licensure boards throughout the country in an effort to share information, to really provide information about what's current, what is accurate in the world of national certification, so that at the end of the day, all of you, and especially the administrative staff, have the information they need in terms of national certification to then make educated and informed decisions in terms of the way in which national certification interfaces with state licensure. We've always viewed this as part of our duty and our responsibility at NBCOT, and so that is just a little backdrop to this particular initiative. With every presentation that NBCOT gives, we always start out with the organization's mission statement. And you can see before you now on the screen that our mission, in many ways, very similar to the mission of your licensing board, is very similar in the sense that we are all here to serve the public interest. And that is where our synergy lies. In the case of NBCOT, we do that in its diversity by advancing just, equitable, and inclusive client care and professional practice through evidence-based certification practices and the validation of knowledge essential for effective and safe practice in occupational therapy. So at the heart of it is serving the public interest and the notion of public protection. And that, again, is where the partnership that NBCOT and occupational therapy state licensing boards really come together. And that is us all working together to really help promote, as much as possible, public protection and safe practice. So everything we do at NBCOT always goes back to the mission statement. That is our focus, that is our mission, that gives us our purpose. And everything that we do aligns with our mission. So as we begin to look a little bit more at the organization at a very high level, one of the things that we want to make sure everyone knows is that NBCOT is accredited by two national accrediting bodies. The NCCA on the right of your screen is a national accrediting entity based in the United States. The focus is US based. The accrediting entity that you see referenced on the left actually got its start many years ago in Europe. And what we want to share with you in that regard is that that accreditation is really important to NBCOT as it relates to the internationally educated occupational therapists that NBCOT ultimately is responsible for certifying when those individuals apply for certification. And so both of these accreditations really hold NBCOT accountable. They both have their own sets of accreditation standards, which we, number one, have to very methodically demonstrate that we meet in order to obtain and maintain accreditation, similar to the Joint Commission, similar to CARF, which many of you are intimately familiar with. The accreditation processes as related to NBCOT are really very similar in nature. And so the message that we want to leave you with on this slide is that these external accrediting bodies are holding NBCOT accountable. We are being held accountable to these external industry accreditation standards. In terms of our board of directors, NBCOT has a board that currently consists of about 15 members on our board. There are OTRs, there are COTAs, and there are also 3 current public members on our board. And we want to take just a moment to really emphasize and stress the value, the importance of the public member role on our board. As I mentioned, there are currently 3 public members that serve on the board. And over recent years, we have revised our bylaws to identify, to require, if you will, that when a new amendment comes forward in terms of any certification related policy. So if there's a policy amendment that's being proposed related to examination development or certification renewal, any of those major certification programs, the bylaws stipulate that all public members must support and agree to the amendment in order for that amendment to move forward and be considered by the full board. If there's any disagreement amongst the public members, if they don't all agree and they're not all on the same page, then that proposed amendment is brought back internally for further review and consideration. But we share that with you because we believe that that really is one way that underscores our organization's value of the role of the public member and the important perspectives that public members bring to the table and to the discussions around various governance and policy related matters. In terms of the organization looking at JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, this is something that NBCOT has worked on and has really, I think, given a lot of emphasis to for many years. And obviously, in more recent years, there has been even additional efforts, additional resources, additional staff time put into these particular initiatives. And one of the things that we want to make sure that any audience that we share information with is aware of, that, and that is that NBCOT has over the last year to year and a half developed some new resources that are now publicly available, meaning publicly at large, not just to the occupational therapy community, but to the public at large. And one of the things that we have made available are JEDI reflection points, which are a series of case-based scenarios. They're each about 20 minutes in length, and they are geared around practical, tangible life situations that are designed to really help provoke thinking around these issues and ultimately through conversation, through narrative, through working with one another, lead us to all becoming better human beings. That's really the goal at the end of the day. And in addition to the reflection point case-based scenarios, we have more recently developed what is called a facilitator guide. And the facilitator guide is intended to supplement the reflection point case scenarios. And it is really developed with the idea that it gives guidance on how these tools can be used in groups rather than individually. And so we share this with you. We encourage you to take advantage of, to use these resources, to share them amongst your family, your friends, your colleagues. But please know that they are available free of charge, 24 hours a day, and we encourage your use anytime you want or need. In terms of the presentation, we took those first few minutes to talk at a very high level about NBCOT as our collective national certification organization. Now we're going to dive more deeply into presentation content, which we've organized in 3 sections. The first being a section that focuses on information pertinent to students. The second, around information pertinent to individuals who've transitioned from that student capacity to passing their exam and becoming certified occupational therapy practitioners. And then finally, we are going to spend some good time and sharing information that we believe is super relevant for you as an occupational therapy licensure board. And so we're going to share information that's specific to the regulatory community. So that's kind of what we have in store for the bulk of the presentation, and here we go. So in terms of the students, here's a picture of some of these wonderful, wonderful students that we meet from all over the country when we're attending various conferences. And as we begin looking at some of the information that we want to share with you today, one of the things that we want to take a minute to talk about is the entry-level practice analysis study. As many of you know, this is very, very critical, very pertinent to the development of the entry-level certification examination, both for the OTR and the COTA. The entry-level practice analysis study is a very comprehensive national study. In the industry, meaning the certification industry, practice analysis studies are generally conducted every 5 to 7 years. In the case of NBCOT, we conduct our studies about every 5 years. The whole idea behind conducting these studies is at the end of the day to help ensure that the examinations that are being delivered and being given to students from all over the country are reflecting as closely as possible what current entry-level practice looks like. And so as part of this national practice analysis study, we conduct a national survey. This survey is sent to thousands of entry-level practitioners from all over the country. And when we refer to an entry-level practitioner, we are referring to folks who are newly into the field, anywhere from 1 to 3 years of practice. So they're just getting their feet wet. And those are the folks, that is the cohort that we are asking respond to this national survey. When that survey has been closed, the data is compiled. We have individuals on staff who are psychometricians who are really, really analyzing this data very, very carefully from a validation perspective. Ultimately, the evidence, the data that is collected as part of this study ends up being reflected in what is called the exam blueprints. There's an exam blueprint for the OTR exam and a separate exam blueprint for the COTA exam. And then in terms of the item development process, in other words, that process whereby questions are developed and at the end of the day end up on the examination, each and every one of those examination items must be written to the examination blueprint, because that blueprint is the foundation of the exam based on the most current evidence that has been gathered as a result of the practice analysis study. So the screen that you see before you now emphasizes these two studies, one for the OTR exam and one for the COTA exam. And what we want all occupational therapy licensure boards to be aware of, especially this year, is that the most current practice analysis study was completed in 2022, and the results of that study are now being reflected on the examinations that are being delivered effective January of 2024. So the current practice analysis study, the current exam blueprints will be represented on examinations for the next 5 years. And then we will conduct another study again. So with that foundational background, we want to make sure as well that you all know that these blueprints, otherwise known as content outlines, are available to you. They're available to the public at large, for that matter, on NBCOT's website. You can see, for discussion purposes, on the left side of the screen, the content outline that speaks to the OTR certification examination. If you look down at domain number 3, there are 4 domains on the OTR exam. There are 3 domains, if you look to the right side of the screen, on the COTA examination content outline. So again, if we're looking at the OTR content outline and we look at domain number 3, we see a corresponding percentage. That percentage of 38% represents the aggregate percentage of examination items that are written to domain number 3, which in the case of the OTR exam is intervention management. Now, if we turn our attention or our focus to the right side of the screen in the COTA content outline, let's look at domain number 2. We see that corresponding percentage at 55%. And so there again, what that is telling us, what that's indicating, is that roughly 55% of the examination items on the COTA examination are written to domain number 2, which is selecting and implementing interventions. If we think about the role of an occupational therapist and occupational therapy assistant, I hope that we all appreciate the fact that these make sense in terms of primary roles, primary responsibilities, and therefore the examination has emphasis in these particular domains. So just know that these outlines are available to you. You can use them at any time, 24 hours a day, that you might need or want them. And again, always feel free to share them publicly as well. So in terms of looking at some of the logistics with the certification examination, one of the things that is super relevant and useful to Heather and to her team is the exam scoring calendar. This scoring calendar is posted on NBCOT's website. For purposes of our conversation today, we're only focusing on 1 month, the month of April. But if you were to look at the scoring calendar on the NBCOT's website, you would see that this scoring calendar literally goes out to the end of 2024, so that exam candidates and board administrators can really anticipate, plan, look ahead in terms of scheduling the exam for exam candidates and retrieving exam scores for board administrators and their staffs. One of the points of clarification that's always important to know about the scoring calendar is that you see highlighted several scoring days. You see that in sort of a turquoise blue color. What we have to know here, and this is something that we stress to exam candidates all the time, is that when they are looking at scheduling their examination, if they want or they need their examination score by a certain scoring date, they need to make sure that they have scheduled and that they actually take their exam a minimum of 3 business days prior to that scoring date. So if we look at, for example, April 9th as a scoring date, if an exam candidate wants to make sure that they receive their score on the 9th of April, they need to make sure that they have scheduled and or taken their exam at the very latest by April 6th. Okay, so I hope that all makes sense. All right, in terms of another fundamental, really critical element of both the exam application as well as the certification renewal application, there is a video that NBCOT has developed. It now lives on our website. And what we want you all to know is, number one, that it exists, the purpose of why we developed this in the first place, which is around public protection. We noticed a good number of years ago that there were students from all over the country who were posting items either directly from the exam, if they had recently taken the exam, and or from study tools. And these items were being posted to social media platforms with no references whatsoever. We knew we had an issue on our hands, and we addressed it very, very methodically and very, very promptly. The long and the short of it is, we developed a video because we thought, gee, we've got to do everything we can to help educate the public at large around the concerns related to these kinds of behaviors. A lot of what we were seeing really was, in essence, federal copyright infringement, when content is being lifted, shared with the public, and no references cited. So we developed this video, which has since become a required component of the exam application process and of the certification renewal process. And so again, everything we do, as we said in the very beginning of this presentation, goes to the heart of the mission of the organization, which is serving the public interest or public protection. This video can be accessed anytime. You can access it 24 hours a day. So please, please feel free to use it in whatever way best meets your needs as a regulatory board. In terms of some data, NBCOT collects a lot of data, and we are very pleased to be able to be in positions like this to share the data with various constituencies. This data point pertains to those score transfers that we talked about earlier, that Heather and her staff obtained. In other words, this is their way of knowing through the score transfer whether or not an individual has passed the certification examination. That is incredibly important information. And because confirmation of passing the national certification examination is a requirement that every jurisdiction has, you can see that the total aggregate number of score transfers around the country is quite significant. In 2023, it was over 24,000. So if we look at another data point, which pertains to eligibility confirmation notices. The vast majority of states have a provision or language in statute or regulation that allows for a temporary or a limited license to practice. That said, not every state has that kind of provision, but again, the majority of states do. And in those cases, those states also require what is called a confirmation of eligibility notice. This notice confirms for the state board that the individual who has applied for the national certification examination has applied, the application's been reviewed, the transcript has been received, and most importantly, that that applicant has been deemed eligible to take and or sit for their national certification examination. So that's the value of the confirmation of eligibility notice to these state boards. And they require this before they issue a limited or a temporary permit. And again, goes to the heart of serving the public interest.
May I ask a question, Sean?
Sure.
Yes, so thank you. I just wanted to bring people up to date who might not be as familiar with MBCOT. This is, of course, MBCOT certifies all applicants and limited permit holders for eligibility. Are the confirmation notices and the score transfers, are those just presented by individuals to the board? I mean, I know they are to this board for where they're seeking an initial license or a limited permit. Is this data transferred in aggregate to the board, or is it only on that individual basis, or is it, do we request it, or do you send it? How does that transfer of information work, if I may
Sure,
ask?
That's a great question. And you know what might be best is Franchelle is going to review information, Chair Bookwalter, that's going to speak to the heart of your question. So if it's okay to sort of delay the answer, she's actually got that covered in her remarks.
Perfect, thank you.
You're very welcome. So we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that this slide deck is built around three major sections. And the second of the three sections really does speak to this transition in moving from a student of occupational therapy to passing the exam and becoming a certified practitioner. And so that's what this next section focuses on. And we want to begin with speaking briefly to what is called the NBCOT Navigator, which is an online competency assessment platform. The whole premise behind the Navigator is that it provides OTR and COTA practitioners with an evidence-based resource, a value-added resource to help build knowledge in an area that they may be moving into. For example, if they are transitioning from one treatment setting to another or one patient population to another, practitioners can use this platform to help them build knowledge using an assortment of different types of self-assessment tools, all of which are steeped in the most current evidence-based literature that exists. And so that is probably one of the most unique features about the Navigator platform, is that every element of every tool is steeped in the most current evidence that exists on the subject matter. So if we look into this a little deeper, we, having unveiled this, and I think many of you already know that we started publicly unveiling the Navigator in 2015. It has been a labor of love. It's taken a lot of work, but we are just super excited with the response. And we're going to give you a number of slides that speak to this. But this slide confirms for you that there are now over 200 different tools that live on this platform. And this slide just gives you sort of a smidgen of the different types of tools that exist. Case simulations, orthotic builder, mini practice quizzes, OT knowledge library. There's another tool, PICO, which is focused on evidence-based research and the notion of how to develop an effective evidence-based question. And then lastly, physical agent modalities. So that just gives you a very small sample of the type of tools that are now living on this platform. So if we look beyond this, we want to share with you some of the newer tools that have recently been made available to both COTAs and OTRs. And we're going to start out first with the COTA cohort. The ethics and the veteran experiencing homelessness case simulations have recently been made available to the COTA cohort. These are all case simulations. And so the idea behind these simulations is problem solving, which is something that practitioners have to do every single day. And in these cases, they're all animated. All of the characters are animated, whether it's the patient, the parent, the physician, the physical therapist, the occupational therapist. All parties in each of these scenarios are animated, and they are built around case scenarios that are really challenging us to problem solve therapeutic situations. If we look at new tools that have recently been made available to the OTR cohort, here are just a couple: public health crisis, pediatric mental health, and middle school autism. Again, all of these are animated. And one of the things that we want to make sure and point out is that the public health crisis case simulation tool was developed in direct response to the thousands of occupational therapy practitioners around the country who gave of themselves so selflessly during the pandemic. The challenges they faced, what we learned from that, and people telling us, we need a tool that speaks to this experience. And so that's an example of us listening and then working toward providing a tool that was reflective of what people were asking for. In terms of a different type of tool that also lives on the Navigator platform, these are new micro-credentials. You see there are several for the OTR cohort and several now available for the COTA cohort. The idea behind these micro-credentials is that they are in a multiple choice format. They provide a practitioner with the opportunity to dive deeper into a subject matter, to learn at a more in-depth level, and again, knowing that the entire micro-credential experience is linked on the back end to the most current evidence-based literature. So this is just another sampling of the kinds of tools that have been developed over time. At this point, there are over 249,000 competency assessment units that have been earned on the Navigator and over 515,000 tools played. So again, it's taken a number of years, but there has been a lot of interest and a lot of traction. And so it's something that we are very excited to be able to share with constituencies from around the country. So in terms of the states that recognize the Navigator, and California, thank you so much. You were one of the states a good number of years ago that agreed to acknowledge the Navigator, as has 46 other states and the District of Columbia. So a total of 47 jurisdictions plus DC now recognize the Navigator as an optional type of activity that their licensees can use for meeting the state's continuing education requirement. I should point out, because California is one of the states that's highlighted in sort of that greenish color, that you and the other states highlighted in that same color, asked NBCOT, when you made this decision, to be sure that we clarify for the public that you were acknowledging the navigator with the understanding that any licensee needs to make sure that they fulfill, that they meet all of the other regulatory requirements that the state has intact, that the regulations speak to. And so that's why there is a slightly different color combination to this map. All right, so we are now on to our third section, and I'm going to turn this over to my wonderful colleague, Franchelle Panetta. So Franchelle, take it from here.
Sure. Thank you, Sean. All right. So Sean has provided some background information about NBCOT and ways that we support students and work with certificates. And now we are going to transition into how NBCOT works with regulators such as yourselves. We will review resources and services that we have available for you and share some useful data with you as well. Here is some state-specific data that you may find useful. Please know that all data presented is focused on practitioners that are currently certified with us. This data is collected through surveys that we send to certificants to share their experiences. Please know that all of this data is available in the certification data book for your state and all others. A hard copy was sent to your board. We typically send one to the primary board administrator and one to the board chair. A digital copy has also been sent out to the regulatory community, so you may have seen this in your email also. Here you can see on this slide that California has 13,259 total OTRs. California is one of the states with the highest total number of OTRs. I believe at this time, California has the most OTRs in the country. The average year certified for OTRs is 14.1. Which is great. This shows that OTRs in your state are very seasoned professionals. Regarding population.
I'm sorry, Franchelle, can I just, your voice is dropped, there may be not enough volume in the speakers because your voice is dropped your voice is dropping out a couple times. So I wonder if you could speak just a little bit louder. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you for letting me know. Is this better? Are you able to hear me better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so back to the slide, I'll reiterate, California has 13,259 total OTRs. California is one of the states with the highest total number of OTRs at this time. I believe that California has the most OTRs in the country. The average year certified for OTRs is 14.1, which is great. This shows that OTRs in your state are seasoned. Regarding population, the ratio of OTRs per 10,000 people in California is 3.4. Please note in the map on the right that this data is further broken down by county based on a certificate's home address. So you can see areas that are densely populated with OTRs and those that are not. The top 5 practice areas in California for OTRs are adult rehabilitation, pediatrics, older adult, schools, and musculoskeletal orthopedics. Other practice areas have also been noted, but these are the top 5 that have risen to the top. And also, lastly, the most popular navigator tool used by OTRs in California is the mini practice quiz on pediatrics, specifically school-based therapy. Now for COTAs, you can see California has 3,324 total COTAs. Again, one of the states with the highest number of COTAs. The average year certified for COTAs is 8.5. Regarding population, the ratio per 10,000 people is 0.85. Again, please note in the map on the right that you can see this data broken down by county. So you can see areas that are densely populated with COTAs and those that are not. The top 5 practice areas in California for COTAs are adult rehabilitation, older adult, pediatrics, schools, and musculoskeletal orthopedics. So it's pretty similar to OTRs, almost identical, just a slightly different order here. So there does tend to be similarities across states with this. And the most popular navigator tool used by COTAs in California is the OT Knowledge Library, specifically pediatric ADL skills. Note again that this data is focused on those practitioners who are currently certified with us. And this information, again, can be viewed at any time in the certification data book. Our colleagues in the marketing department have been working really hard over the past 5 or so years to put these data books together. And this data can really be used to support the board. For instance, positions you may need to take or informing decisions on legislative initiatives. You can actually also compare data over the past couple of years regarding practice areas or look at data over the past few years to monitor workforce issues or take a closer look at underserved and rural areas. This is really meant to be a resource for you. This data presented to you today reflects most of 2023. As you may recall, this data was published in September of 2023. Next, I will discuss the NBCOT State Regulatory Administrator Portal. Heather may be familiar with this and the services available here. Every single primary administrator is issued a username and password for the administrator portal. The primary administrator can also grant access to more colleagues, as many as needed, as well as restrict access to customized privileges or provide full access to all information and services available here. Everything you need can be found on this portal. It is meant to be a clearinghouse for you. This is the type of information that you can expect to see and access. Score transfers, as Sean mentioned earlier, provide proof that an individual has passed the exam. You can find these in the portal. The eligibility confirmation notices, which Sean also mentioned earlier and was asked about previously, they provide proof of eligibility to sit for or take the exam, and you would be able to access those here as well. The OT Action Exchange database can be accessed here on this portal too. And this tool is really meant to be a one-stop shop. You would see actions that we have taken here, and states report disciplinary actions in the database as well. Meaning other states or jurisdictions would show up here for a certificate if any states or jurisdictions have taken any disciplinary action in the past. If you are interested, we have a video we can share with you that is also posted, I believe, on our website. And it pretty much walks you through what it would look like if you were to search for a certificate on OT Action Exchange, just to see if there have been any disciplinary actions or sanctions. VCVC reports, VCVC stands for Visa Credential Verification Certificate, which is a service for our international applicants, as Sean alluded to earlier. And the VCVC reports can be accessed through our administrator portal. And finally, verification certification is a tool or service that you can use to easily see an individual's certification status. This bar at the bottom here is what it would look like if you were to search for an OT or an OTA. You would see the initial date of certification, the expiration date, and any disciplinary actions we have taken, if any, at NBCOT. As you may already know, NBCOT conducts research with OT state regulatory boards through surveys and document review. All information is compiled into research reports, and these reports can also be found in the regulator portal. Recent reports include licensure processing timelines, dry needling and wound care, and temporary licenses and limited permits. We know that dry needling is being discussed tomorrow. I believe that we saw that on your agenda. So you may find that particular report useful if you want to know how other states or jurisdictions have handled dry needling or are addressing dry needling in the next 12 months or so. So please know that if you have any difficulties accessing this report through the portal, that we are happy to send this to you directly. If you think that would be useful for you, just let us know. Now, there are 11 states that accept NBCOT certification as an option for licensure renewal. Almost all jurisdictions require continuing education for renewal. So in addition to traditional requirements for state licensure renewal, which might involve uploading certificates or sending photocopies, these 11 states recognize that to renew certification with NBCOT, 36 professional development units are required. So with this understanding, they accept proof of current certification as an option for fulfilling continuing education requirements because we at NBCOT require this also. So essentially, these states listed on the slide allow for current certification as an alternate way to confirm that continuing education requirements have been met for licensure renewal purposes. OT practitioners would simply need to upload or submit proof of their certification with us. Next, we are going to discuss the OT Licensure Compact, which is a joint initiative with AOTA. We have been working on this since 2019. Significant progress has since been made. We now have 28 states enacted, which you can see in blue on this map, and there are 8 states where legislation is pending or being considered, which you can see in this aqua or green blue color. We are hopeful more states will be enacted or will be added to the enacted list. As you may already know, we are in the middle of standing this up. There is a compact commission. We have an executive committee. Many other committees have been formed, including the compliance, finance, rules, communications, and elections committees. All are working very hard. Throughout 2024, the commission is working with developers to create a database for the compact. This is essential for receiving applications, providing interstate data communications, and of course, issuing privileges to practice. At this time, the Compact Commission anticipates issuing compact privileges in 2025. For the most up-to-date information, we recommend going to the Compact website, which is otcompact.org. This website is updated on a regular basis, and you can also find meeting schedules and information here too. So if you are interested, please know that all the meetings are public and you can attend them if you would like to. We recently developed an agreement with CE Broker. As you may already be aware, some state OT boards also use CE Broker and have their own formal arrangement with CE Broker. As another value-added benefit of national certification, our certificates have access to CE Broker. This allows certificates to track, upload proof, and report continuing education to us and state regulatory boards. The basic membership is free through certification with us. This typically meets needs, but if certificates choose to or would find a higher level membership more beneficial, they can sign up at a discounted rate if necessary. This is meant to be a seamless and efficient process for audits for both NBCOT and state licensing boards. And as an OTR myself, I have recently begun to use this feature, this free membership, and log my continuing education onto CE Broker. Should I ever be selected for an audit in my home state, I know I can easily log into CE Broker and see all my credits and access my certificates easily. So this is benefiting everyone, and we are all partnering together. Every year, as you may already know, we bring the regulatory board community together for our leadership forum to learn about current and emerging issues and trends in occupational regulation, certification, and licensure. And maybe possibly something is happening in one part of the country or a certain region, but not yet in another. This is really meant to be an opportunity for us to all learn from each other. This fall, our 2024 OT State Regulatory Leadership Forum will take place on Tuesday, September 10th and Wednesday, September 11th. Typically, the program is held in the afternoon both days, around 12:30 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Hopefully all, if not most of you at this point, have received our Save the Date email. This year will be our 31st Leadership Forum. We used to hold the Leadership Forum in person each year. While all regulators would be invited, our funding was typically limited to the board chair and primary administrator. Not all states could send everyone, as that could be difficult to budget for or afford. So when the pandemic hit, we had to pivot and started offering the program virtually. This is our 5th year holding the Leadership Forum virtually, and the response to this format has been great. There has been great attendance. The virtual format also allows greater accessibility in terms of affordability, as you can now just simply log on to the meeting. And with everyone's busy schedule, you can simply join in as your calendars allow. The Leadership Forum is free. All state regulators, including board members, board administrators and staff, and any of your attorneys are invited. We do offer PDU credit to those who attend live. And again, you are welcome to join in whenever works for your schedule. We would love to have you for the whole time, but we certainly understand how busy you are. And if these dates don't work for you for some reason, maybe you aren't available one day or both days, or there's a certain session you think is really interesting, but it just doesn't work with your calendar, please know that the sessions will all be recorded and will be made available for you to view via a link. So a couple of days after or shortly after September 11th, we will send the links for you to view the recorded sessions. Again, we hope you can join us for this year's Leadership Forum. More information about the program and calendar invitations will be sent at a later date, so stay tuned. As you may already know, we have an ambassador program, which was initially developed in 2019 and launched in early 2020. We established this program a few years ago to really have people on the field providing updates on our behalf and to be a resource in their home state or jurisdiction, to be a main point of contact for NBCOT. And ambassadors also provide important information to NBCOT about what is happening in the community or state. Ambassadors report to us important updates such as workforce issues, policy issues, or any other issues that they just think are really important for us to know about or monitor or keep an eye out for. So it's really meant to be a two-way street here. There is training and orienting involved for this role of an ambassador, and we always promptly send out any updates we have to the ambassadors. So they really are a great resource and they are very current and up to date. In your state, you have a great ambassador, Cesar Arada. He has been doing a wonderful job and we are very happy to have him. He has recently joined the ad hoc committee on supervision standards. So you may have recently seen him or interacted with him in that capacity and will likely continue to do so in the coming year. And if any of you are attending the OTAC conference this fall, he will also be exhibiting on our behalf. So you may see him there as well. Now we are going to discuss disciplinary action. Like the process and procedure that you have with laws and regulations, we have a disciplinary action at NBCOT too. We have documents on our website that are really comparable to your procedures, and you can access these at any time that you need to or want to. Similar to your work, we have our code of conduct, we have our practice standards, and aligned with these are our enforcement procedures. There is synergy all around us. We are all working to protect the public together. For us, we are legally responsible for adhering to these procedures, and if we veer off, we could find ourselves in trouble. Again, similar to you, we have enforcement procedures at NBCOT. You receive complaints and appeals and look into disciplinary action just like we do. You oversee licensees in your state, and we have jurisdiction over exam candidates and certificates. Upon receipt of a complaint, NBCOT initiates an investigation. NBCOT takes disciplinary action against an individual when there is clear and convincing evidence of a violation of our candidate or certificate code of conduct. Our procedures for enforcement, again, are on our website. You can access them at any time to see more details on our procedures that apply upon a subject's receipt of a proposed sanction letter, procedures that apply prior to the hearing, and procedures for the hearing itself. Again, you can review these documents on our website if you want to learn more about how and when our procedures come into play, as well as how our code of conduct is implemented across different contexts. Here is a graphic also available on our website. This is a disciplinary action process that we have in place. Feel free to share this with others to increase awareness and understanding of what our process is. You can use this graphic in any way that you need, just for your own information or even educational purposes. Just know that this is available to you and we encourage you to use it just as you need. Disciplinary actions that are taken by us are posted on our website to the public. Similar to you enforcing your state laws, on this slide, we have cases by source. This table shows a breakdown of where NBCOT has received cases from for 2021, 2022, and 2023. We receive cases through our early determination reviews, which I will speak more about in a later slide. We also receive cases through complaints, self-report, and state boards. You can see a large portion, actually a majority of the cases that we receive are by state boards. So as you can see in 2023, 64% of cases came from state boards. Please know we welcome and encourage state boards to report any final actions taken. We appreciate you sharing this information for us, and we appreciate our partnership. You are very important in serving the public interest, and we can protect the public better together. Other cases come up through our character review questions, which are not just on the exam application, but also on the certification renewal application. And this is added protection for the public. Candidates or certificates must answer a series of character review questions, such as have you ever been convicted of a felony, or have you ever had a professional license revoked, denied, or suspended, and have you ever been expelled by a college or a university. There are other questions included, which you can find on our website. And as you can see on this slide, the exam application and renewal application have been another fair source of cases over the past 3 years. So next we will discuss types of behaviors we have seen rise to the top at NBCOT for a few types of sources and the actions or consequences that have been taken. Early determination review is a process that helps a candidate determine if they are disqualified from taking the NBCOT exam. For example, a student may have completed a program but has a felony in their background. There is a fee involved and we need a copy of legal documents. And we actually encourage or welcome any individuals who are worried maybe about a poor choice they have made in their past to complete this process as soon as possible. Potential candidates can go through this process before they even apply for school. This is certainly our preference, as the last thing that we want is for someone to go through a whole program or their whole fieldwork experience and find out that they can't sit for the exam. These are the top behaviors that come up in early determination reviews. Felony conviction and misconduct with harm to another have trended at the top in 2021, 2022, and 2023. Last year, we saw that 33% of cases were related to felony convictions, and 67% were related to misconduct with harm to another. These are cases from responses on character review questions in the exam application. These are what we see most in terms of type of behavior. As you can see, many cases come from misdemeanors, felony convictions, or felony charges. If we take a closer look at 2023 on this slide, we can see that 9% of cases were related to felony convictions, 15% were related to misdemeanors, and 11% were related to felony charges. Again, we also see misconduct resulting in harm to another here, which has been pretty consistent over the past 3 years. In 2023, we also saw HIPAA violations. While the vast majority of OT practitioners are great, we do receive some complaints, but the amount that we receive are not necessarily a significant number. Unfortunately, there are still some practitioners who make poor choices. And here are some behaviors over the last 3 full years that have resonated to the top for OTs. There are some other behaviors coming to our attention as well, just not the same numbers. Again, here we see cases involving felonies and misdemeanors. On this slide, you can see last year in 2023, lack of continuing education made up 22% of cases for OTs, followed by documentation problems at 13%, and practicing with an expired license at 12%. We do also see substance abuse cases. We wish that we could say that we've seen this completely go away, but we just haven't. Now, these are the types of behaviors that have risen to the top for OTAs. Non-identical to OTs here, but there are some similarities. These behaviors may resonate with you and come to your attention. We have some misdemeanor cases. We have seen documentation problems and lack of continuing education for the past 3 years. And practicing with an expired license has also been a trend. In terms of taking a closer look at the data here, in 2023, lack of continuing education made up 29% of cases for OTAs. Documentation problems made up 17% of cases, followed by fraudulent billing at 9%. You may also have seen similar trends in regards to disciplinary actions and licensees as well. Now we will take a look at sanctions actually imposed. This is data on disciplinary actions that we have actually taken and what type. Here on this slide, we have sanctions imposed in the early determination review process for the past 3 years, 2021, 2022, and 2023. We received other cases, but we are happy to report that in 2023, only 1 reprimand and 1 probation were imposed. Reprimand is the least serious sanction that can be imposed. This is the only sanction that would not be posted to the public. All of these sanctions are defined in the enforcement procedures on our website if you would like to learn more or need to refer to this information at a later time. Here on the slide, we have sanctions imposed on exam candidates for 2021, 2022, and 2023. Again, we do receive more cases, but are happy to report the number of sanctions actually imposed is quite low. Here we can see in 2023, only 4 reprimands, 3 censures, and 1 ineligibility, followed by probation, were imposed. As with the early determination review, the sanctions here are not as serious as these individuals or candidates have not completed their programs yet or have taken the exam yet. Here we have the number of sanctions imposed for OTAs. Just to reiterate, sanctions are posted on our website and would come up in a verification of certification requests and the OT Action Exchange database. Similar to your mission as a licensing board, we work to protect the public. So we want you to know that you have access to this information in various ways. With regard to the data on the slide, in comparison to the early determination review and exam candidate sanctions, you can see that there is an increase in the number and severity of sanctions. We still see reprimands, censures, and probations, but over the past 3 years, we have also imposed suspensions, and we also see emergency suspension and voluntary surrender here. Again, sanctions are described in a procedural document on our website. Anyone can access this at any time if they need to or want to. Here we have sanctions imposed on OTs. The number of sanctions, again, have increased here when compared to early determination reviews and exam candidates. You again can see that the sanctions are more stringent for practitioners and are more serious. While there are still reprimands, censures, and probations, again, over the past 3 years, you can see that there have been a few suspensions, as with OTAs. There have been a few voluntary surrenders here over the past 3 years, which our procedures do allow for. Or you may also see revocation for practitioners, which is the most strict form of action here at NBCOT. It is the most serious, and revocation at NBCOT is typically more stringent or more strict than states, as NBCOT defines revocation as permanent removal of certification. We will close out our presentation by coming full circle. We have a common mission of serving and protecting the public. We are stronger because of our relationships, and we are strongly working together. We are constantly working on building trust with state regulatory boards, and this strengthens the power that we can do, or what both entities can do together, really, and we are better able to protect the public together. We hope this presentation or virtual visit will help foster and continue to build an open, trusting relationship. We want to emphasize that we are here to support you and answer any questions even after this presentation. We are here if you need us, you can reach out to us. And here's our website link, nbcot.org. Again, feel free to refer to the resources that we have available for you. And again, as Sean mentioned, we are so thankful to have had the opportunity to present to you today. We really thank you for creating time and space on your agenda for NBCOT. And it's been a privilege and pleasure to be able to speak with you and share this information. Again, if any questions arise after this presentation, you can contact Sean or me by email or phone, or you can reach out to NBCOT by emailing info@nbcot.org. If time allows, we can certainly take any questions if there are any that we can help address.
Thank you very much, Franchelle Pineda, and also Sean Conway. I want to emphasize how important it is, the relationship with NBCOT, which is the certification and exam provider for initial OT licensure by regulation in California, and that it's very helpful to have the information on the practice, the preparation of the exam and the revisions of the exams and how that takes place over the years for at intervals, at important intervals. We've just talked also as a board about justice, equity, diversity and inclusion, and ethics as important topics for continuing competency, and so your continuing competency products are of interest. I've also personally attended the OT state regulatory leadership forum online, and it's been terrific. We haven't been able to go much in the past because of the travel and the cost and everything for California, but so having it virtually, I found it extremely useful, especially some ethics. I remember sitting at a restaurant waiting for some food and listening to the an ethics presentation that was extremely helpful about how other states handle ethical dilemmas in practice, and I found it very helpful, and I would recommend it to all board members. I want to just take the opportunity to have board members ask questions. Dr. Pavlovich?
Yeah, thank you, President Bookwalter. Franchella, I got that at the tail end. You said something about revocation of certification being permanent and a little more stringent from the NBCOT perspective. How does that work? For instance, if we're in the state of California and they might have, they always have option usually to appeal after a certain amount of years, 3 or 5, if something with if a license is revoked. And in that case, if they come back, they submit back for licensure and it's approved, they're still not able to get, so if it's permanent revocation of certification for NBCOT, and say the license was removed by the state of California, but then it was reinstated, how does that work with NBCOT? Does that make sense? I think you're on mute. Oh, sorry.
I think you can hear me, correct? I just want to make sure. Okay, great. Having some audio issues, so I apologize for that. So in NBCOT, as you mentioned, it is revocation would be permanent. So an individual will not be able to become certified again with NBCOT. I believe what you're describing sounds similar to maybe a suspension that we might have here at NBCOT. And Sean, feel free to jump in and add on. But other sanctions that we have would be for a certain amount of time. And then maybe they could apply to be certified again or apply for reinstatement with NBCOT, but a revocation is considered permanent.
Yeah, that's good, Franchelle. And the only other thing to add on, Sharon, that might be useful is that in the procedures, it is very clearly and methodically spelled out that with any proposed sanction, but certainly with regard to a proposed revocation, that there is an appeal process that is built into the procedure as part of that decision-making determination. And so if a revocation were proposed and if the subject of a disciplinary action case were disagreed with that decision and wanting to appeal, he or she has every right to do that. They have every right to have legal counsel and or any other representatives with them as part of that appeals process. And the only other thing that might be important to note is going back to Franchelle's earlier comment about the burden of proof. The burden of proof in the NBCOT Code of Conduct is clear and convincing evidence, which, when you think about it, it's not the highest standard in our legal structure, but it is quite significant. So in order for revocation to be rendered, it is important to know that the level of evidence that is required in order for that kind of decision to be made is really significant, oftentimes overwhelming.
That's very helpful. Thank you, you two.
Sure.
You're welcome.
Other board, Dr. Pavlovich, any more questions for NBCOT at this time?
No, trying to wrap all that up with how we work with our licensure, but thank you, President Bookwalter.
Thank you. Thank you. Other board members, any questions for Sean Conway or Franchelle Pineda? I'd like to thank you both very much for taking the time to meet with us. I know it's later there in DC, but this is very important information for us as we partner together in certification and application applicants and all the ways that we have worked together over the years. I appreciate it very much, and it's very important for the state to have this recorded and available, because in California we do look at the exam process and how exams are for initial licensure are maintained and created, maintained, kept current. So that's extremely helpful information at intervals to hear about all that NBCOT is doing in that regard. Thank you very much. We should open do you have a minute for us to ask for public comment?
Sure.
Okay. Can we open to the people in person? Do we have any public comment from people here in the room? Nobody behind the pillar? Hearing none, can we open, David, can we open the floor for public comment remotely?
Absolutely. We are open for public comment on the presentation. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sean and Franchelle. I appreciate it. We're going to move
Very
on to our next
welcome.
agenda item.
Great, you're most welcome.
Thank you. Actually, this is a good time to take a break. I'd like to break for, should we do 15 minutes?
I just had a,
Oh, I'm sorry.
based on the conversation we had and what Dr. Palovich brought up, I would like to know if we do have practitioners that have been revoked by NBCOT and is practicing in California. So I guess that's a staff request that we can get that information, and that way we can discuss what do we do next. If that's true, that NBCOT revokes them and they're permanently banned from national certification, how do we handle them here as practitioners in California?
Do we have an answer to that question, Jody, regarding NBCOT? If NBCOT revokes, if they're revoked after they're certified initially, would the board know about it? NBCOT sends the board a regular notice of members in California who've been revoked.
As far as I know, they would be sending us an actual, some type of communication that has happened, but they can't work in California without an MB. Oh, is it on? It's green.
Here.
Okay, we can. Back on? Okay. So without the certification, the national certification, they wouldn't be allowed to work in California. It is a requirement. So whatever, I'm not sure how the notification comes, but as far as I know, we have received them before. It was probably in Jeff's time.
There was a process.
Right, there's a process, but staff will get you complete details. We just all are
We'll
aware that
report
without
back on that.
NBCOT. Yeah.
Right.
with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Question to that, if I may. Franchelle, hi, this is Denise Miller, board member. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Can you just restate, when is it going to be mandatory again to have the R behind the OT or the certification? When is it going to be mandatory? Right, as you know, there was a time it wasn't mandatory.
So again, I'll start off, and Sean, feel free to jump in whenever. It's mandatory to pass our exam to get an initial license to practice. And then after that, it does vary per state what their requirements are in that particular jurisdiction. I'm not sure if you're maybe thinking about a policy that we have upcoming beginning January 2027, January 1st of 2027. We have a new policy coming up where if certificants allow their certification to lapse for more than 3 renewal cycles, then they would have to retake and sit for the current national certification exam in order to get their credentials from us back.
Thank you for that. So if there is a member, and I guess, hi, Sean, nice to see you as well. If there is a member that was during an occupational therapist, let's say, that did not opt in at the time that the R was no longer required, and they did not opt in, right? Then we're not going to know if there's any certification issues. It's only going to be a license issue should there be a disciplinary situation, right? Like you're not going to know. Once they pass their certification, you know, like let's say someone took their exam in 2003. They passed the certification, they kept renewing, they kept renewing, they kept renewing, and in 2000, Sean, I don't remember quite when it wasn't mandatory. Was it 2009? When the R wasn't
Well,
mandatory?
yeah, actually, it's not mandatory, nor has it ever been per se. Where it can become mandatory, and I should clarify that South Carolina is the only state that requires their licensees to be currently certified by NBCOT to both obtain a license to practice as well as to retain it over time. So that's the only jurisdiction that legally requires their licensees to be currently certified with NBCOT. So from a practical perspective, Denise, to your question, if we understand that certification by NBCOT is voluntary, which it is, where it can become a requirement, aside from South Carolina, is if an employer requires for employment conditions or employment purposes that an OT or an OT assistant needs to demonstrate or provide proof of current national certification with NBCOT. That is a scenario where, from a practical perspective, it could become a requirement. But in and of itself, from a policy perspective, individuals, as Franchelle was saying, have to take and pass the national certification exam because all state licensing boards require that. But after the individual passes the exam, it is a voluntary requirement by each practitioner to choose to renew their certification with NBCOT or not, unless they're practicing in South Carolina and or unless they work for an employer that is stipulating current certification as an employment criteria. So I hope that helps.
And if I just have a follow-up comment, if I may, and that does help a great deal. And so what I would find helpful and interesting is to know how many PDU violations South Carolina licensees have. Because if they don't have many, perhaps this is something this board might consider our professional association to look at for the state of California. Thank you. Thank you, Sean.
May I ask one more question? Follow-up
Thank you.
question, President Bookwalter?
Sure.
Sean, I guess one last question, and Franchelle, when I was looking at the numbers of certificates that you have about 16,005, close to 500. We know there's close to 22,000 licensed practitioners, OT practitioners in the state of California. So there's a discrepancy, right? So I'm just doing like general math. So about 6,000 OTPs in the state of California aren't NBCOT certified. But the new law is changing in the new requirement is changing in 2027. You know, if you don't do your renewals, so it you know, you're not able to register with NBCOT, and for California, you need that. So it kind of is mandatory in the sense that if you, according to 2027, 3 renewal cycles, you haven't done it, you are not going to get, you know, your certification, your your C or your R, depending on what type of practitioner you are. So one, I'm looking at numbers from California and then NBCOT, and they're not matching. So I always wonder what's happening to those 6,000 that aren't registered with NBCOT now. Where are they according to the cycle that's going to change in 2027? And I know we say it's voluntary, but it's not really, because after that, again, 3 cycles are up, you have to sit for the board examination all over again. you know, if I've been 30 years out, like, that's super hard. But that's where my head's just kind of like, these numbers don't make sense. It is kind of mandatory, but then we hear
Well-
voluntary. So I'm just a little confused.
I'm not finding that in our regulations, Sharon. I mean, we don't have a regulation requiring recertification in California. There is section 4125 in our regulations that states that an occupational therapist or OT assistant cannot use the R or the,
C.
because those are trademarks, or I'm sorry, trademark is the wrong word, but they belong to NBCOT for certification. But there isn't that just because NBCOT requires somebody to take an exam for recertification, if recertification is not a requirement in California, it's not mandatory for Californians practicing OT unless, as Sean stated already, that it's a requirement of their employment. Is that we're not, this board is not bound by NBCOT's policy changes as evidenced by a number of policy changes over the years in terms of continuing competency, where we used to be totally aligned with our continuing competency requirements and what constituted continuing competency and what didn't. And then there was a divergence as NBCOT has developed its programs further, but that doesn't obligate us unless we change our regulations. It's not mandatory.
So the
And
2027,
if I may,
go ahead.
the point you bring up, President Bookwalter, is a good point, and it's something that we might want to look at it on future agenda item, because the key word I think that really was illustrated is alignment. And there is going to come a time where we will be, the license board, you know, the state with the largest licensees will be out of alignment with NBCOT, and we may want to take the time, you know, it takes a long time to get language in, so might be something for future agendas for you all to consider.
That's what I was going to bring up. I was like, maybe we want to, for a future agenda item, discuss requiring that NBCOT is required, like South Carolina, and to discuss what, like Board Member Miller said, you know, let's look at the numbers of South Carolina and see how their requirement has, you know, deal with violations and all that other information that we deal with, and see, you know, is there, you know, some benefit for us to require this and for the future licensures? I know it's going to be difficult for our practitioners and all the different tests and certifications. So I know there will be some, you know, people against this, but maybe we can look at it and see what there's the benefits or pros and cons of requiring this.
Okay, sounds like we have a future, potential future agenda item. If the board has no more comments, I'd like to open it to public comment, since we've had some robust discussion about this. Anyone in person who would like to make a public comment? Raise your hand. I'm seeing no hands. Can we, David, moderator, can we open to public comment through WebEx?
Absolutely. We are open for public comment on agenda item 5. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand. And as a reminder to our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button, that's the ... at the bottom, in order to find the page with your hand button. We're going to give you 3 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 30-second warning before your time expires. Boone, and you're going to have to help me with that last name again. I see your hand is up. I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Thank you, David. No worries. Ada Boone Hurl, COT, Sacramento City College. In listening to this vibrant conversation, the first thing that comes to my mind is the new 2027 requirement if you've missed 3 cycles. And then if the board has discussion later on about requiring NBCOT certification, I worry about that group that's left behind. I don't have an answer. I wonder how is there potential for discussion about a grandfathering in? I don't know how that would work, but it is something that stood out to me as a point of potential discussion as these conversations continue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
President Bookwalter,
Thank you, Ada. Let's just make sure we have a public
well,
comment.
it's to her.
Is there any other public comment?
There's no other request for public comment at the moment.
Okay. We can only take a question. Well, go ahead.
That question that was asked by the public, wouldn't Sean Conway be able to answer that? Because if they're not going to grandfather them in, are you grandfathering anybody in after 2027 that has passed 3 renewal cycles?
The issue would be ours, Denise.
I understand, but I want to understand what they're going to do.
No, the new policy does not have any kind of grandfather clause. I think it would be important to stipulate that that new policy will take effect going forward, meaning from 2027 onward. And so the way it's written, it speaks to 3 consecutive renewal cycles, which would be roughly equivalent to 9 years.
So that's about 6,000 licensees in well, there was, yeah, whatever the gap was, because we have 22,000 licensees. And if you total up their numbers, it came to like 17, 18 with OTs and OTAs. So there's a,
I look forward to putting this on a future agenda, since 2027 is a few years away. And we also have to see how the project changes between now and when it's implemented. And I do believe we must take a break. So thank you very much. Any more public comment remotely?
No other requests. Mr.
Thank
Board
you.
President.
At this time, I'd like to excuse Sean and Franchelle, and thank you very much for joining us. I would like to take a 10-minute break with return. It's 10:50, return at 11. Thank you very much. I'd like to return from break for the May 2nd, 2024 California Board of Occupational Therapy meeting. Thank you. Our break was a little more extended than we expected. I appreciate your patience. We're returning at 11:17. The next item on the agenda is number 6. Review and vote on approval of the February 8 and 9, 2023 board meeting minutes. I'd like to turn your attention to the packet. Does anyone have comments on the text of the minutes?
The only comment I have would be on page 4, where member Christine Wittlisbach replaced. So either we switched places because I replaced her on the Education Outreach Committee and she replaced me on the Regulatory Affairs Committee. So kind of doesn't line up because it's either we resign and were put on that committee, or we kind of just got replaced each other. It has to be kind of the same language.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
What language would you propose?
It's either we both resigned from each committee and got appointed to these other committees, or we just replaced, so like it's consistent with both of us, because it's exactly the same thing happened with both of ours. So it said that she resigned, so that means that I resigned from the Education Outreach Committee.
So do you have exact, I think I see some exact, oh, is
So
that not
it's
exact
either we
wording?
replaced or they switched, so I'm okay with either or. However, it sounds more professional.
I like, for me, I think the first part, the one that says board member Christine Whitlock join the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee and resign from the Education and Outreach Committee. So then the second part should be Vice President Beata Marcos joined the Education Outreach Committee and resigned from
That's
the
perfect, yes.
Legislative and Regulatory Affairs
Yeah, that's perfect.
Committee. That way it's consistent and it says that they both resigned and then joined.
Yeah. How do we do those changes? It's
Can you read,
it's
can you read
on.
that, can you read that again?
Yes, so we're gonna strike out Vice President Beata Marcos, replace Ms. Whitlock on Educational Outreach Committee, right? And replace that with Vice President Beata Marcos joined the Education Outreach Committee and resigned from the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee.
Is your mic on?
Yes.
Okay, do we have, does that sound good to people? Any other changes in the text of the minutes?
I move that we approve the meeting minutes from the February 8th and 9th, 2024 board meeting with the changes as noted.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Secretary Doe, a second from Board Member Miller. Any further board discussion? Hearing none, let's move to public comment. In-person comment first, please. Do raise your hands if you'd like to comment publicly. We have no in-person public comment. Can we move to the WebEx comment, public comment, please, moderator?
We are open for public comment on the amended meeting minutes. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand. And as a reminder to our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button, that's the ... at the bottom, in order to find your hand. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue?
Thank you. Public comment is closed. We have a motion on the table to adopt the board meeting minutes from February 8 and 9, 2024 with a change crafted by Beata Marcos and Lina Doe. Can we take a vote?
Board Member Cabrera?
Yes.
Board Member Miller?
Yes.
Board Member Palovich?
Yes.
Board Member Whitlock?
Yes.
Secretary Doe, yes. Vice President Marcos?
Yes.
And President Bookwalter.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the next, that completes agenda item 6. Moving on to 7, the Open Meeting Act requirements as of January 1st, 2024. We do not have that information in the packet. Is there a verbal report on that, or is?
Yes, I'll be handling that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So this is kind of a summary of the new provisions. Before COVID, boards and committees used to meet either in person or virtually with the notice, with the location of each member noticed and accessible to the public. During COVID, we were allowed to go virtual with the location noticed waived. And then later we were allowed to meet either in person and or virtual, any combination with the location notice waived. Effective January 1, 2024, the legislature adopted some new rules in order to permit some virtual meeting, but also meet the requirements of public ability to access their government representatives. So there are rules for both board and then for committees. For the board may meet in person. They may meet in person with a quorum physically present, and then additional members beyond a quorum may appear virtually without noticing a location. If there is some combination of less than quorum physically present in one spot, virtual members' location must be noticed and accessible. I apologize. If the member fails to appear at a physical location as noticed, the meeting may be canceled. If you would like to appear virtually from your home and there isn't going to be a quorum present, you must post your home address and allow the public to enter your home. If this requirement is necessary for you to appear virtually, we would recommend that you work with the executive officer to find an alternative location that would be appropriate if you would not like the public to come into your home. For committees, any combination of physical or virtual is acceptable. Anyone appearing virtually, however, must have their name listed on the agenda. And then for both board and committee members, the legislature requires that the members be on camera at all times. The legislature believes it is important for the public to be able to observe the meeting in full, including the nonverbal communications of the members. So members who are virtual but not on camera will not be participating in the meeting. There are multiple details, and so if questions arise, of course, the executive officer and I are happy to assist, but those are kind of the big impact issues that are present for the board and the committees. Are there any questions?
So I know for us, this is the only meeting that we have a virtual component that's readily available and easily to access. So in the future, are we discussing that we're going to potentially work to make sure that every meeting that we have has a virtual component?
If the members are meeting in person, it's not required. If that is available, that is wonderful. You cannot have a member appear virtually but not allow the public to appear virtually. So theoretically, you couldn't set up a phone with just them on Teams to be present. But a meeting that is just purely physically present with no internet capability is still acceptable.
My understanding is this is the only venue that offers all the technologies as well as an in-person meeting currently.
So there
Is
are
that correct?
there are other meeting locations like this that do have that accessibility. When we travel to a school, they may not, at which point we all need to be physically present. If we travel to a school that does have this capability that was built in during COVID and we could use it, we can do that. We do have boards that take all of their IT with them in order to be able to do that. So some of it is just simply technological abilities. So if we don't have that, then we're working with an in-person, and that is acceptable. Yes.
Do you know of other locations of this type where other boards have met?
Oh, yes. The Board of Accountancy has their board meeting that is set up like this with all the capabilities. I believe there's other boards and bureaus that have like their own meeting place. I believe like Franchise Tax Board probably has these capabilities. So they exist, and of course they are also being built out. But for DCA general, this is the most accessible location at this time. I do believe we are expanding to try and include other hearing rooms.
Are other boards, do you know of other boards who've been able to get, well, accountancy is a board, but Franchise Tax Board, do we have access to that as a
I don't know.
licensing board? Yeah, we don't know. Okay. Thank you. More
Yes.
questions?
Yeah, I have a question, yes. So I was wondering, did they, you said there were some other details about this. Did they say anything about, I've heard like in some board meetings or committee meetings, and I understand that public members don't need to, introduce themselves. They don't have to do that. They don't have to say that they're even there. But that some people are attending these virtual meetings, not being on camera and actually not even using their real name. Did they say anything about attending a meeting and using like a different name? Did they address that?
So
That
that's
seems
always been
concerning.
permitted under Bagley-Keene. There is no we have to allow public access and public comment, but
Mhm.
they can remain anonymous. In the case of if someone were to use a cuss word to identify themselves, we would simply say the member with the explicit name, and we wouldn't use that name. But otherwise, they are free to use whatever name, including commenter A, to in any way or ability. The point is not to identify them, but to allow them access.
Gotcha.
And so that is, I believe it's in the statute that they do not have to be identified, but the actual
Okay.
details to that have always been of that access. And even if you go onto WebEx, you do have to put in an email,
Mhm.
but we do notice that the email can be user@xxx.com.
Gotcha.
The system will not kick you out for not having a reliable email, just that it has to have words in there.
I gotcha. Okay.
Any other questions regarding the Open Meeting Act? Any public comment? In-person public comment? We see no hands. Can we, moderator, can we ask for WebEx public comment, please?
We are once again open for public comment. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. For our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button. That's the ... in order to find your hand button. And our first comment comes from Ada Boone Hurl, I believe is how I'm supposed to say that. Let's see if I got it right this time.
Very good, David. Thank you so much. I
I'm trying.
appreciate you. Thank you. I very much appreciate the opportunity to participate in a virtual manner. I understand and respect the difficulty of building technology, identifying, locating, etc. I just wanted to make the comment that if it's a solely in-person location, my my home area, then I will continue to not be able to participate. It's not just about me. I'm using it as an example of the value of the accessibility through the internet. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. And that was our only request for public comment.
Thank you, moderator. Let's move on to item number 8, the president's announcement of committee appointments. I've made 4 committee appointments during the period since the last board meeting. First, Kirsten Laughlin, OTD, has agreed to serve on the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee. Ada Boone Hurl has agreed to serve on the Supervision Standards Ad Hoc Committee. Candace Chapman and Penny Stack have agreed to join the Education and Outreach Committee. And so I'd like to announce those to the board. We also have a committee that we're setting up for the executive search for our new executive officer. And at our last meeting, we discussed having a 3-member committee consisting of the president, the vice president, and Christine Wittlisbach, who was involved in executive search for the current EO many years ago. There has been some information that they're presenting tomorrow. The HR is presenting tomorrow the procedure for it. And I've gotten wind of some recommendation for a 2-person committee, but I think we'd just like to hold off until tomorrow to discuss that committee in case there's a compelling argument to change from a 3-person committee. But I want to point them today because I think it's better to just see, we could hear them out and see if such a recommendation comes forth, what that reasoning would be on that.
President,
Does that make sense?
President Bookwalter, so we did discuss that committee and those names. We just did not make a motion. Are you
Right.
asking us to wait till tomorrow to do that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would suggest, that's been suggested by, I think, legal and the executive officer had a discussion about it. It's my understanding, so.
To wait
To
until
wait
tomorrow.
So we can get the HR presentation. Is that is that okay with everybody? Yeah, okay.
It's not going to change my view.
Yeah.
Better be compelling to be two.
Do we have public comment on the committee appointments? In person? Here, seeing no hands in person, may we, moderator, can we ask for WebEx public comment?
We are once again open for public comment. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. For our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button. That's the dot, dot, dot at the bottom to find your hand button. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you, moderator. We have a request to move the practice committee report. You want to do, oh, no? Okay. Thank you. We'll proceed then with the agenda as it's in order. We'll start with item number 9, the practice committee update. And I give the floor to Christine Wittlisbach, chairman of that committee.
Okay, so notes are in your packet, obviously. We did meet, well, in your packet, you will see the practice committee meeting minutes for December 8th. And then pertinent to our discussion today, you will see the draft highlights of the meeting that we held on March 1st. So again, remember, these are not meeting minutes. These are just highlights for the purpose of discussion today. The committee met virtually on March 1st. We met for a couple hours, and basically we spent a couple hours talking about one issue. And this issue came to the board's attention, I believe it was a couple years ago. We got a call from the public asking a member of the public if whether or not advanced practice approval in hand therapy is required to treat carpal tunnel syndrome, repetitive motion injuries, or finger, hand pain, wrist pain, or elbow pain that is not due to injury or surgery. That was the question that was sent to us in the practice committee. Basically because there's so much language surrounding this issue in the law, and the board just wanted us to take an issue or a look at the issue and come back with some recommendations. So that's what we did. And we started out, and I'll try to make this as brief as possible. We started out by looking at the legal definition of hand therapy that was found in the Occupational Therapy Practice Act. And that essentially states that hand therapy is the art and science of rehabilitation of the hand, wrist, and forearm. So we looked at that language in the law that already exists. We looked at the regulations that further defines that and says that rehabilitation refers to treatment resulting from surgery or injury to the hand, wrist, and forearm. And I'm just going to take this moment to point out in the highlights for purposes of when we do the minutes that there was a couple words that were omitted here. Do you see where I have to put my glasses on to see you? Do you see where we're
on page 3?
Yes, on page 3, it would be under item 7, 1, 2, 3 in the third paragraph. So it would be repetitive pain that did not result from an injury or surgery. We just forgot injury because that was integral to the discussion. So for the minutes, we just need to put that in. So anyway, we talked about the language that was already in our law, because of course that's what we have to go on. We don't get to make independent decisions in committee. We just look at the law and how it might apply to the situation. And we talked about this particular question, which was a really difficult question for us because it was so broad and reaching. So just briefly, as everyone knows who are practitioners, we have this overarching category of conditions called repetitive strain injuries or cumulative trauma injuries. And under that can be a variety of things like tennis elbow or carpal tunnel syndrome or de Quervain's tenosynovitis. These things that cause aches and pains and numbness and tingling and all sorts of pain in the upper extremity. And it tends to be defined under these categories of, like I said, repetitive strain injury or cumulative trauma injury. These are categories of conditions. But when we further talk about the diagnoses that could fall under these, for example, we talked a lot about carpal tunnel syndrome. There are different ways you can develop carpal tunnel syndrome, and they're not always a result of injury. For example, you can get carpal tunnel syndrome purely from being pregnant. Just the buildup of fluid in the body can put pressure on the median nerve, and you can get numbness and tingling and pain in the hands. And then simply having your baby will help resolve that. But during the 9 months of pregnancy, this can be very painful, and some pregnant women do get referred to hand therapy or occupational therapy and physical therapists who practice hand therapy to get some relief for this. And so in that case, is that truly an injury to the hand, wrist, or forearm? And in that instance, no. But in a lot of instances, carpal tunnel syndrome or injury to the median nerve or irritation to the median nerve is caused from surgery or injury to the hand, wrist, or forearm. For example, postoperative swelling can cause irritation of the median nerve, and you can get those symptoms. Distal radius fracture can cause that. Repetitive use of the hand and wrist can also cause it. There's lots of other types of things that we might say, yes, that is from an injury to the hand, wrist, or forearm. So there are different etiologies for these diagnoses. So took us about 2 hours to weed through these. We talked a lot about this. Richard is on my committee, Chairman Bookwalter. And what we ended up with deciding to recommend to the board was to explain this issue, which I just have, and to say that there was a reason that we included this language in our law, or whoever was in charge of this. When this language was included in the law and then further defined in the regulations, that there was a reason for this, that really each individual case is unique and specific. And we can't really say an overarching yes or no to this question that was asked, that if someone has this question, the answer would really lie in what is the etiology of that specific problem that that specific patient is having. And if it is, as the law says, surgery or injury to the hand, wrist, or forearm, if that is the etiology of that diagnosis, then yes, it would require advanced practice approval by the board for that therapist, because that's what the law says. But if the etiology of that particular issue is not surgery or injury to the hand, wrist, or forearm, remember my example about pregnancy, then no, it would not require advanced practice approval for that practitioner. So there is no answer for everything. That the recommendation that we would make to the board is to direct staff to tell people who call with this question that it depends on the etiology of the problem, and to refer to the language of the law, if that makes sense. I hope I'm making myself clear. And Richard, if you want to further clarify what I'm saying.
No, I think that reflects very well what we discussed at the meeting. I have had thoughts since the meeting, which I'd love to share.
Please.
Because one of the committee members says, well, where does that leave the therapist who wants to know? People want to know what they can and cannot do. And I appreciate that, because a therapist is an occupational therapist is going to get a referral from a doctor for carpal tunnel syndrome, and the therapist is going to have to do digging to find out whether it's a result of surgery or injury, a result of something else. If it's something else, then they have to turn that patient away and find another therapist to see that patient who has the certification
Approval.
approval. I'm sorry, the approval, which can be a real service issue. And also, it's very confusing to the consumer. It's confusing to the referral source. And it may be that what that therapist should be doing, can be doing, is to set up a supervision arrangement with a therapist that has certified, has the approval, hand therapy approval, to obtain the approval that might be needed for that, in which case there can be a collaboration with a therapist who has hand therapy approval. The client is not inconvenienced if that, provided that there's some, there's obviously some training and a supervision agreement that therapist may be able to, I mean, they're going to get carpal tunnel referrals from all over, and most of them are going to be injuries. And so they really ought to get the,
Approval.
I think we should encourage them to get the hand therapy approval, to set up the supervision agreement, to gain the skills to work with that population, especially, in Northern California, in small areas with few therapists, outside the coasts, and outside the major urban areas. You're going to have people are going to face hardship coming in to these appointments, and it is possible for a therapist in Siskiyou County to have a supervision agreement with a hand therapist with approval in another county, learn what to do, and gain the hours and the skills needed for that approval. And I think that we should also provide that information if this question comes up.
Yeah, and I'll also say too, it doesn't have to be, that's a good suggestion, actually, because if you're getting one referral for this type of client, you're probably getting more. Yes, you don't necessarily have to seek out another occupational therapist with advanced practice approval. Also, the law allows for any physical therapist to be your supervisor, or any physician. So you could also set up a supervision agreement with someone like that. So it really does open up, a lot of potential supervisors for this issue. I don't know what other people think about this.
Yeah, what do other board members think? Dr. Pavlovich, any comment?
Christine, you had said too, the recommendation was, can you repeat that? Depends on the etiology of the condition and then something about the law. Did I get that right?
Right, so just correct. So it depends on the etiology of the condition, and then refer back to the law. So if the etiology is surgery or injury to the hand, wrist, or forearm, then yes, that treating that condition would require advanced practice approval, or as Richard said, you would be under a supervision agreement to provide that service, because that's the way that you get your hours, right? To get your approval to provide hand therapy services, you're under a supervision agreement. So that could also be done.
Yeah, I support that. I appreciate the robust discussion too, and the time it took to get through all the concerns and comments. And still, I mean, there's more room for discussion, but especially the conversation that said, we're always hesitant to make a laundry list of things because, right, we could never fill that. So I really support the committee in the statement, right, recommending to the board, depend on the ideology and then refer to the law, because I think that's puts the onus on the consumer while having a little bit of guidance from the board as well.
I'm also wondering, just for the purpose of our public members here, if we could just take it a little bit further and discuss that etiology. Specifically, what does treatment look like for an occupational therapist with someone when it's related to injury, hand injury, versus someone with that similar diagnosis and they're pregnant? Like,
Yeah.
I
So-
have some ideas, but I would like to hear from you first.
Yeah. Well, so different therapists do treat different ways. So I think if you ask 10 different therapists, you're going to get 10 different answers to this. But in general, like my thoughts are very similar treatments. Although with someone who is pregnant, until they have that baby, there's not a lot you're going to do to fix that problem. you're going to help them manage that problem, right? So generally what we do for those people is we will give them splints to wear at night, which we would with someone else who had this problem as well, right? Splints to wear at night until the end of their pregnancy, in which case the problem resolves itself, right? Some just general education, maybe some gentle stretching so they don't get tight, that sort of thing for someone with pregnancy.
And is it fair to say that those particular recommendations are not part of advanced practice?
No, I think they are part of advanced practice, but I think advanced practice includes, often includes other things as well. I think the purpose of advanced practice is to recognize subtle nuances and other things that could be going on that maybe someone without the advanced practice education and training might not recognize, might not recognize.
So tell me what your thoughts are on this. I do
Mm.
not practice in hand therapy, but when
Yeah.
I thought about the diagnosis of a pregnant woman with carpal tunnel, I did very much think that I would treat my focus and treatment would be different than perhaps if it was an injury as a result of work or repetitive surgery and such. And that meaning that, if I'm a trained hand therapist, I'm going to use those advanced modalities like heat, ice, all of the different things that you do. Whereas with a pregnant woman, I'm more likely to focus on the gentle stretching to reduce swelling, energy conservation, different body mechanics, sleep patterns, which I don't consider any of those advanced practice. And the reason I'm asking, let me just take it a little further. I wasn't part of your robust discussion,
Yeah.
so I appreciate where you've gone. Where I'm going in my comments is to help not only our public members, but really it is pretty straightforward if you're an occupational therapist, when you would be able to use these with which diagnosis and which with not. And I'm trying to illustrate that with where your committee went
Mhm.
so that there's no further question for people. And so I wonder
Yeah.
if I've gotten close to that.
I think you've gotten close. I guess I would just say just because if you're pushing me to a corner, I don't want to make a sweeping generalization and say like, I wouldn't say that advanced practice comes down to the treatments that we provide or the modalities that we use, because I think those could be, and by modalities, I don't just necessarily mean physical agent modalities. I just mean anything, stretching or whatever. I think those could be provided by either one. What we do doesn't necessarily define whether or not you're going to have a need or require advanced practice approval. But I do agree with you that I think
For a hand therapist.
for a hand therapist,
Correct.
advanced practice
Yeah.
approval for hand therapists, yeah.
I hear you.
But I do agree with you that
I was making comments to the non-hand therapist.
yeah, yeah. I was yeah.
One of the things that I bring up
Mhm.
is, I treat people with carpal tunnel syndrome all the time because I do custom and power wheelchair
Mhm.
Evaluations and recommendations. So does that mean I should leave that diagnosis off of the problem list when I write a note? Because I'm really also treating, usually you have a spinal cord injured person, they maybe were adventurous in their 20s and they had an injury or they got shot or whatever, the usual thing. And then 30 years later, after using a manual wheelchair for all that time, their shoulders start to go, their elbows start to go, their
Right.
hands start to go. It's a repetitive strain injury.
Mhm.
Now, it's in the shoulder, it's a lot of places. And as age takes its toll, so my job is to work with them on providing a mobility device that they can operate without exacerbating their problem. And it could be carpal tunnel syndrome or repetitive strain.
Mhm.
It could include that. And I put that in my notes. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I'm breaking the law when I do that. But they also have other problems. They have a spinal cord injury. They have shoulder repetitive strain injury. So repetitive strain injury of the shoulder is not covered by our law. That's something I can work on without advanced practice approval. And spinal cord injury is something I can work on without. So the diagnosis specific, the legal definition to me is a little bit problematic because, I'm not working on the hand, I don't need hand. I'm working on preventing exposure to further pain as an occupational therapist by looking at how you do your business and how to fix that. And I'm trying to find the language in here where it says that you can do regular occupational therapy, and I'm not sure where that is. I have to look it up. I believe there is a somewhere in the regs or in the law where
Nothing to prevent them from providing both.
from regular therapy, but I don't, we'd have to find that because
Yeah.
I didn't find it before the meeting. But I hope that, that I wouldn't be prevented from treating somebody who has pain from using a walker or a wheelchair that happens to be in their hands from providing a better device that would help eliminate and remove that.
So just,
This is my issue with this,
I was going to say it because
Language.
my comments
Yeah.
weren't indicative of where you were going, but I appreciate that. So if they were, to answer your question, no, repetitive motion is absolutely in scope for an occupational therapist. What I'm really trying to get at, and maybe if I could just ask one more remind me of the problem statement again for your committee.
What the question was from the
Yeah.
public? Okay. Let's see. Okay. Whether advanced practice approval in hand therapy is required to treat carpal tunnel syndrome, repetitive motion injuries, or finger hand pain, wrist pain, or elbow pain that is not due to injury or surgery.
And the answer that you came up with is it is not required, correct?
Well, if it's not
The
due
recommendation
to injury or
is
surgery, then,
the-
then yes, it
Okay.
would not.
So
yeah.
I agree with that. And where I was trying to go with my comments is really how was there further discussion? Because what's really critical
Yeah.
is the occupational therapist who is not trained in advanced practice and knowing when to stop, knowing where they can treat and when they can stop. That's really what I was trying to get to.
I get you. Yeah.
Did you go there in your committee, or could you maybe go there? Only because they'll come back if there's a violation. I'm looking for no gray area.
It's very difficult.
Yeah. But
It's-
again, that's all just
Yeah,
things
no,
to consider. That's what the origin of my question was.
yeah, it's,
How's the therapist going to know when to?
I,
I know where my line is, but does everybody? Have we made it clear?
no, I understand. I think personally, I think there is still a little bit of a gray area, but I think we don't make the law. We can only try to interpret the law and answer the question based on the law. And I think this is as good as we're going to get, as close as we're going to get, as good as we can get until we have a specific case where harm was done to try to determine, I don't know, negligence or it's very nuanced. It's very nuanced. And I don't know how much closer we can get with the language that we currently have. We can't, you know.
And can I, just this a last question to the chair. Just in your experience, you are a hand therapist, you have a lot of years of experience in being on the committee. Could you just from an experiential standpoint say why you're behind this piece so I could, the recommendation that's been made, can you talk about the positive aspects of it? The clarity, all the things that do work, I guess is what I'm
For me
about it.
personally,
Yeah.
if it's a simple, let's just take carpal tunnel again. If it's I think the average occupational therapist can treat simple cases of carpal tunnel syndrome where there's not, let's just say, for example, pregnancy. If there's not a surgery involved, if there's not a definitive injury involved, I think we have the skills to do that. The law restricts us to some degree when the physician has determined that it's an injury. And we don't have leeway there. We don't have leeway there. This is the law. We can't make a recommendation that's counter to the law that we have in place or the regulations that we have in place. So how I personally feel and what the leeway we have within the laws might be two different things, if that makes sense.
So we have a couple of action steps with this report. Thank you very much. One of them is, of course, to the board can instruct the staff, and we already talked about this when Heather Martin was the president at the committee meeting, instruct her, I asked if she needed a motion or whatever, if we need to go to the board for this, and she said, no, if you're just telling the staff to repeat what the law says and send it in a letter to a person who's inquiring, we don't need to do that. But we can also ask them to supply any person who asks about this with the supervision, the guidelines, the requirements for getting a supervision to obtain hand therapy approval to aid them in moving forward as well. I think that we could add those two things, and that could be an instruction to the staff. I don't know that we shouldn't need a motion for that either, since it's basically asking them to provide information already in the regulations and already in the law. Do we have a consensus that that would be a good strategy moving forward based on this report? As a pragmatic move? Any objections to that instruction? No? Sharon Pavlovich, I see you shaking your head. People are silent. So, okay, so why don't I'll do that. Oh, yes. We also, the other thing on our agenda is we have the minutes. We need to decide whether or not to accept the practice committee minutes of December 8th. I don't believe we did that because those were, the board got highlights at our last board meeting in February, and the minutes, because there were, the practice committee had not met again to approve minutes.
Motion to accept.
We have a motion. Okay, a motion to accept.
Second.
Thank you. Do we have public comment? And we can take public comment on both the two things, not only the vote on the minutes, but also on the strategy for informing people who inquire about this issue and the people who already wrote the letter. In-person public comment? None. Sharon Pavlovich, you have your hand up.
Just a clarifying question, President Bookwalter. Are we allowed to accept minutes if we aren't part of the committee?
The board accepts the committee's minutes. So yes. Moderator, can we open public comment to WebEx
Absolutely.
participants? Thank you.
We are open for public comment. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. For our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button, that's the dot at the bottom, in order to find your hand button. We're going to take a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with your motion?
Yes, please. We have a motion on the table by Board Member Miller, seconded by Secretary Doe. Let's take a vote.
Board Member Cabrera? Board Member Miller?
Yes.
Board Member Palovich?
Yes.
Board Member Witzlesbach?
Yes.
Secretary Doe, yes. Vice President Marcos?
Yes.
And President Bookwalter?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Motion carries. Wonderful. So, all right. Now we're at 12:03. We are scheduled to pick up food, break for lunch at 12:15. Do we want to cover one more item while the lunch is retrieved, or do we want to, can we spare you for that? Is that possible? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we're going to continue with item number 10, and then upon return, after that, we'll break for lunch. And then after that, we will return for our hearing, to prepare for our hearing at 2.
Did you order? didn't send it to you. Do you want me to
All right.
forward?
So I'm happy to report on the work of the Disaster Preparedness and Response Committee. The Disaster Preparedness Response Committee has met twice since the last board member Cabrera and I and Mary Everett, an occupational therapist, are the members of that committee. We met on April 10th. Hector and I met, and then Mary had some technology issues and joined in progress. And we met again on April 29th, and Mary Everett and I met, and I think, unfortunately, Hector was not able to join us. So, but we did come up with some recommendations. The April 10th, 2024 draft meeting minutes are in the packet. Sorry, it's a number. Pardon me while I get there myself. So we can we looked at a number of it was a kind of a brainstorming session where we wondered what we can do as a board to encourage and contribute to disaster preparedness. Let me get my notes. We knew that there were resources at the state level, at the federal level, the Red Cross, some of which included OT, some of which didn't. Mental health was an important thing, an important element of disaster preparedness, but so are physical and practical measures. We looked at the Emergency Medical Services Authority, California Emergency Medical Services Authority, disaster medical response programs, the California Healthcare Volunteer Programs, the California Medical Assistance Team Programs, which are all programs set up for disasters and preparedness and response. And we were looking at a couple of strategies. The possibility of requiring professional development units related to disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. This is on page 3 of the minutes, by the way. Partnering with that's one possible board action to consider. Another is partnering with AOTA, OTAC, and the Accreditation Council on Occupational Therapy and other organizations to promote the board's interest in training. Ask staff to find out more about some of the EMSA programs, the CalMAT programs. Draft some webpage information to include on the DCA's Disaster Help Center webpage and also on the board's website that are linked together. Review of National Disaster Emergency Management education standards and developing a survey to determine the licensing population's awareness of disaster emergency preparedness and response, not just awareness, but also what are people getting in their workplaces and other places? What are their needs? For example, I work at Kaiser, which is a big organization. Some people work for big hospitals where they have or school districts where they have disaster training, others in settings where no such training takes place, and they are more, they have a greater need for another source, another location for that kind of training. So we ended up focusing on the survey and on the webpage as products that were sort of manageable projects that the board could do. The website maybe having a more immediate term. It's a fairly short-term thing, being able to get a website up that has reference materials for people to use and showing them different things. And then the survey was the second thing to find out what sort of a needs assessment could inform any follow-up efforts based on what the needs, what needs were found. So we have, that was our first meeting. The second meeting, we actually looked at a draft of a survey, which is in the packet, and some information that could be included on a website. So I turn your attention to the Monday, the April 29th. Let's see, past the April 29th meetings. There is the WIFIT. There's also a large packet here on the World Federation of OT Disaster Preparedness reference materials. Let's see, is it here? Behind that is a survey draft. So it's almost at 11, almost at the very last back of the packet. There are two sections. One, it looks like this. Can you, oops, can you see the survey? Like this. It's at the back of the 80-page World Federation of OT document. Yeah, it's it's in the packet that was sent today. Yes. Okay.
Richard, I think we also providing mental health resources for children, elderly that might be experiencing trauma
Yes.
due to, let's say, an earthquake, a fire, whatever the circumstance is.
We did.
We
You're
did.
right. And then we
that.
discussed, yes, we did. And that was something we discussed at the last meeting as well, about how to, right now, I mean, that's included, mental health is included in the survey as like to what degree, you know, so mental health is one of the, what population do you treat and what tools do you use? Well, if we we can look at the survey and can see if we want to add stuff to it or to address, to get at questions of mental health and post-traumatic or post-disaster stress. So for example, it begins, do people have the survey in front of them now? We decided, yeah.
May I just understand, this survey was used previously or this survey was created as a result of your?
It's a brand new survey created as a result of this committee meeting.
Perfect,
So
thank you.
we decided to try making a survey. We brainstormed some questions at the meeting, at our first meeting and at our second meeting. Staff brought back this document to look at as a potential survey instrument. Knowing well that, the board members may want to add some things or change some things. And the purpose of this survey is to ask occupational therapy licensees whether they feel they need or they have, what they need in terms of disaster preparedness and response training.
I don't know if you can see it, but it looks like Board Member Pavlovich has a question.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Yes.
Oh, no, it's okay. President
Sharon
Buckwalter.
Pavlovich.
Yes, thank you, Denise. I noticed there are 8 items asking for input, but the very top, it says CBOT needs your help by answering only these 3 short questions. So it's not really 3. I just want to FYI.
That would be edit number 1.
Okay.
It started out as 3. A few short questions, perhaps. It started out with 3, and I can't remember what the 3 original ones were, but we decided we needed more. We wanted to, while we're at it, we would get some more information. I think it was going to be, do you get emergency response? Do you feel like you have, what kind of, do you feel like you're prepared? What do you need something else? They're basic. So we filled them out a little bit. Do you address issues related to emergency response or what to do in the event of disaster with your clients / patients? That was one of the 3. List the topics of information you provide, what information would like to provided to you. And then we talked a bit about assessment tools. Mary Everett was pointing out that the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure was one used by a colleague of hers, Terry Crow, who was working in Hurricane Katrina relief and is an occupational therapist in that area. Proposed also that Terry Crow may be a future presenter to the board about working as an occupational therapy in a disaster situation around using the experience of Hurricane Katrina, and that's something that we might want to look at as a board. Perhaps after this survey results come back in developing any follow-up action plans.
President Buckwalter, I'm so sorry, can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Just that last line. The survey should take no more than 1 minute of your valuable time. It's probably going to be less than 3, maybe. especially if they have to fill in. People, time matters to people.
Yeah, less than, you think it'll take less than 3?
I would round it up to 5.
If I may just add on to that, I don't know why I understand where people might be going, but I don't know if that statement's necessary. When this would go out to licensees, would it go out with any sort of statement that's like, for example, in your minutes, many of the public commented about the fact that we aren't part of emergency teams. I think was it in your plans to include like a cover letter that really outlines again the problem statement? Because I think in doing that for occupational therapists, they will be more inclined to understand the connection to why this has become so critical and why it's really a value to them and also to our profession and to the consumer who can't have access, many times to occupational therapy for what we're not listed on. So just a thought.
No, I
In
agree.
your minutes outline, I'm not trying to add a heavy lift for anyone. What you discussed in in the minutes and where the board went last time in both cases gives you enough of the problem statement that you could just do a quick, here's why we're asking you to fill this out.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't matter how long it takes, really, because they'll get it. We want you to be listed as part of, what is it, the American Red Cross? Wasn't that one of them in the minutes?
The American, yeah, we're not listed with the American Red Cross
I
or
mean,
a couple of the others. So
Yeah, I don't know how it's just something to consider. It's like, we want our profession to be listed. All the things when you opened up that you discussed would be perfect to say to the professional, like,
Yeah.
this is why we need your input. Just a thought.
yeah, I mean, I agree with you because I think that we do need a little bit of an introductory statement, and we weren't really sure we didn't get there. We didn't quite get there into the introductory statement part. We thought, let's put the survey, get the questions on the survey together. But I agree that having an introductory letter or something to draw people in is important. There are actually 3 documents here. There's the survey, there's the DCA's Disaster Help Center webpage, which has some other boards on it, and there was a draft statement from that one. And then there is a draft chart, CBOT information and resources on disaster response and risk reduction, where I did write a brief paragraph there, but it was basically, it is what it is. It's a draft paragraph about occupational therapy practitioners help California consumers reduce disaster risks and response to emergencies in a number of ways. The following resources can help OTs and OTAs learn about. So I did that, and we put together a whole couple pages here of things that could go on a website, and actually it could go on 2 websites, one for consumers and one for practitioners, with some cool tools. We didn't print out all the tools. Some of these links have beautiful, here's how to do a checklist for all your financial information. Get this, and this, and put them in a packet and take them out. The FEMA has some wonderful resources like that are classic OT, a checklist that you can do with a client to make sure they're prepared. Disaster preparedness with pets checklists, disaster preparedness for disabled people, disaster preparedness plans for seniors. Those are resources that we found that are on this list that could go onto a website. Heather Martin, our executive officer, proposed that we do one website. Since there's so much, we could have a consumer page and a practitioner page so that it's broken up a little bit. Practitioners could get more, and the consumers would have a more discreetly packaged set of links. But it would require some kind of narrative, like, this paragraph at the top of the 3rd section.
Sorry, can I go back to the survey?
Yeah, we can go back to the survey.
On item number 7, I think that should be expanded on. I mean, after they say if it's required, like to ask the person filling out the survey what kind of education is required. So that way we can get an idea of what other education they are getting if they say it's being required.
So a comment field.
Yeah,
number
comment
7.
field. So like if Yes, if required, please expand so we understand.
And on that, and on that same note, back to the survey, you know, if you are considering doing, I don't know how long your group wanted to make it, but I do think you could take out a lot of the opening statements there if you are going to do a letter to the intro up there and use more of the space for a question. But to board member Cabrera's point about the mental health, I do think there, that it is of value to understand specifically what an occupational therapist does when presented with a client with who's gone through some sort of disaster. You know,
So would that?
how do you
would that fall
address,
under item 3, if you added a line to item 3 around mental health?
what information would you like provided to you? So just to make sure the purpose of this survey was to get information on our licensees who are doing disaster preparedness.
Yeah, actually, let me step back a little bit, because one of the discussions we had in the minutes, Mary Everett was saying that was floating the idea that the board might want to consider having a requirement that for your PDUs, for your continuing competency education as an occupational therapist, that you be required to take a class in disaster preparedness, to, as we do already for some other things. And we've always been reluctant to bind, to make too many requirements, because we have people who aren't fulfilling the requirements that we have. But adding a continuing education, would we add, again, would we add, like we did with ethics and with some other diversity, equity, inclusion, in saying that we should also, there must be an hour of disaster preparedness or disaster response, an element of that in the continuing education hours that we require, or on top of that. And so the question there then was, what do people already get that through their, I get that through my employer. We have active shooter trainings. We have, lots of disaster, related trainings. We had the fires in Kaiser, Northern California, where we were involved with, that. So is it necessary for the board? Is it necessary for the board to have that? One position is that yes, maybe it is. Maybe the board should make that a requirement, or maybe not, because people are getting it somewhere else. So that is kind of what this came from.
I thank you for that. I guess where I'm trying to go, this is great. So I'm not trying, I would just like to see one question that connects the disaster preparedness to the consumer, because it's coming from the license board and not just information that's very practitioner focused. Like, I want to hear something about what they do. Do you know? Because we're going to go, if we are going to advocate to the American Red Cross someday as a light, or we're going to partner with, I want to hear from occupational therapists who have been on the front lines working with our consumer, protecting them, what they've done. And so if there's some way, if what I'm asking is a second level iteration that you want to consider, if you want to just start with this, it doesn't matter how your committee chooses to get there. My real message is I just don't want questions about the consumer to be like, if you want to do a future iteration, maybe you could consider that.
Yes. No, that's a good question. We had a conversation at the last meeting about whether that step would be good now, or whether that step would be good at the end of this survey. And Mary Everett said, I think this first, and then the step of maybe having Terry Crow come to talk about Katrina and how that worked, how that what that looked like for her, because, and then and doing that down the road when you're looking at potentially taking action on this, and learning more at that time about the experience of the therapists.
So I have two comments.
Yes.
If we want to do, if you want to look at the practitioners that have worked with consumers in the future, then I suggest adding that if you've worked with the consumers for disaster preparedness or have respond to a disaster, can you please put your name that we can follow up with you in the future? That way we don't lose their information, number one. And number two, once we get this survey for a future agenda item, I think we should discuss if we want to add that requirement for PDUs after we get the results and seeing how many of our practitioners actually get some kind of education at their workplace or required or, all that good information. That way we have a purpose of this survey beyond just what the committee needs, but then also addressing it if we need to address it in the future for our practitioners.
Okay, so section one, question one is, do you address issues related to emergency response or what to do in the event of disaster with your clients/patients? And then topics that you provide, and then including there, and
Just
please, could we get your name so we could ask you more questions about it?
Yeah. Somewhere, even it can be the last thing, like if, you can add it, like if you have worked, can we please capture your information so we can follow up with you in the future if we have, once we,
Okay.
in the future, just in the future.
Do you want a name on?
Yeah,
here?
of course, we need their name and like an email address so that we can follow up in
Yeah.
the future, that make sure that we've captured it so then we don't lose it, and then we can follow up with the person because they've indicated that they've worked in a disaster or they've responded to a disaster or they have training in disaster. That way we know we have the information, then we won't lose it, and then we don't have to go back out there and say who've worked with, who's been in a disaster or who's worked and responded to a disaster. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have that information to go back to.
So that, if that may provide the continuity that I was speaking about. So something you might consider is in your intro to the therapist filling this out, letting them know that this is the first iteration of the board's deep dive or whatever into disaster preparedness, however you want to word that, so that they know that this one is about the practitioner, and like, even to board member Joe's point, if number 9 had something like, if you've ever worked with someone who's experienced a disaster, you've ever treated them, please provide your contact information. So there's a way both in the current survey to let people know that a future one's coming, as well as the intro, and it's just building the momentum around this very important topic.
We don't want to lose that information.
Okay, that's good. Do we want to add any more on mental health on this survey? Do we want to add it as a wish list item for number 3? Do we want to add it in some other way?
You can always add, is there anything that you would like to add? That way, if they want to address mental health or they want to address something else, that we have that captured also. Because, these are very good questions, but, there may be a practitioner out there that has something else that they believe should be mentioned when dealing with disasters.
Okay.
I agree, Lena. I think a question 9, would there be any other comments you'd like or something to add that would help, whatever? I think capture all at the end of 9, so it would kind of fulfill that requirement that board member Adele was just talking about.
I also think, Richard, that perhaps adding or putting something about bilingual services for those who are not English speaking. I guess those that are experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder due to the emergency that happened.
Yeah, how would that look? How would that look in the survey, do you think?
Well,
Board member Cabrera, do you think you're talking about barriers?
yes.
Barriers to, like, are you talking about like like language barriers, disability,
Language barrier.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we should do a barrier question then. Have you experienced any barriers to service? And put language, social, just make a list and they can
There you
check
go.
mark and then add a comment. That way we have it all encompassing. Because there are more than just, of course, language is mainly one of the big ones in California. But then of course there are, social barriers and, financial barriers, whatever. But there are many barriers that you can probably list it down. That way people can comment on it, then we can address them. And be aware of them.
Can you identify barrier, or have you experienced any barriers to service with regard to disaster planning and
Yes.
mitigation? Okay.
Can I, just based on looking all of this, so when I'm looking at disaster preparedness, I'm not thinking about mental health because it's not a disaster preparedness, right? This is for emergency situations.
It's more
while-
response.
Yeah, so maybe the mental health should be, is it something that is part of disaster preparedness? Or are you making a statement that it is?
Well, we start out with disaster preparedness, and then you look at the stuff and it's all like, there's disaster preparedness, there's the disaster when it's taking place, and then there's response.
Right.
There's the immediate response and then there's the aftermath.
So this would be the aftermath.
And so you would, yeah, I mean, it's kind of three parts. They now look at disaster emergency management in three parts: before, during, and after. And so that's what makes it kind of a big topic and hard to, it's kind of hard to put into a manageable pieces. And the survey was an attempt to try to carve a chunk out of it that we could, if you will, that we could maybe focus on. And mental health, but mental health is big. And some of the research that we looked at, some of the documents we got at previous board meetings was all about mental health during COVID, right? Much of it was about mental health during COVID. So the paper that we got from Rondell and Whitney was primarily that, one of the documents that we looked at. Because that nature of that emergency, but then there are other emergencies where you're looking at other factors, like going to the bathroom in a shelter. Yeah.
So this is probably going to be an unpopular opinion, and please don't take this the wrong way. I agree with everything everyone has said and suggested for the survey. I just want to make this statement. If we make this too long, people are not going to respond. I mean, I can't tell you the number of surveys that I've started, been like, this is going on forever. I don't have time for this, delete. So I don't know if we want to consider just like boiling it down to like what, I mean, yes, there's lots of things we'd like to get, but what is critical to get?
We're only supposed to have 3 short questions, and it's already,
Yeah.
we already gave you,
I think we can limit it to 10.
became
I think
8,
10
now it's
questions is
10.
good. If we go beyond that.
How did we get to 10? Isn't
Well,
it 9? with the
No,
comment?
we have 10 because we have the comment section.
Oh, the barriers in the comments.
Yeah.
And wherever your committee ends up on that would be okay. I just want to be,
We're
I just,
we're
I
actually
wanted,
bringing it back to the board, so the board the committee's not planning to meet unless the board wants the
Okay.
committee to meet for to develop this, because
I'm not so moved by that comment that I'm going to comment to it, but
Okay.
someone else who can, I want to go back to Board or Vice President Beata Morco's comment. So if you look at question 6, those really are the terms publicly that have been put around disaster planning. We didn't choose them, but our approach as occupational therapists, we would be remiss if we didn't include mental health. And it's even indicative of the notes and the comments that were made by Mary Everett and this whole group. And so I, for one, would say, I mean, quite frankly, it really brings out our distinct value. And so when we as a profession are looking at value, the example of the woman who worked on Katrina, the questions that she asked those consumers were very much related to their mental health needs, which led to engagement, which led to better outcomes. So we very much do address it. And I wouldn't want it taken out. I wouldn't want to not be asking the practitioner if we're going to ask them.
So how does that, how do we operationalize that?
Well, you've already done
Oh.
it. I guess what I want you to know is that question 4, where you have mental health, based on our previous discussion and what the committee was bringing back to the board in terms of trying to achieve, if that's what you're trying to achieve, this will be the first iteration, then this survey does it. And if you are looking for emotion, or this survey does it with some, minor comments. Now knowing that there might be a follow-up one that's specifically about consumers, I can definitely get behind this.
I didn't want to remove anything from the question 4. I just didn't think that we should add anything further regarding that. Because I think,
Which comments,
no, because it was mentioned that you might want to add more information about the mental health. I think that if people just know, like, okay, I'm treating this group and it's included, right? So we're going to get that answer from the practitioners to what they're treating. So I think it is mentioned. I just don't think further mentioning is necessary.
Yeah, we had that discussion at our last meeting, Mary, because Mary pointed out mental health. It didn't seem to emphasize mental health as much as she was thinking. And so we had a conversation about it. I said, well, we looked at item 4 and we saw mental health is here. And is that enough? Do we want to add more? And upon further discussion, her point of view was that it's there. So it's a pathway along the way to further action. I mean, my emphasis was on getting getting an outcome that we could actually have a product that the board could take action on. And a survey seemed like a really good idea. It was Mary's idea to do a survey, and because you don't know if you're going to consider education and providing more education and advocating education, what education is needed, seems a needs assessment of some kind. And then Heather Martin showed us the second. Well, maybe are we still on the survey? Can we do we have enough comments to send it back to staff to give us another draft at another board meeting?
well, I just want clarity based on the most recent discussion of I just want a pulse, if you don't mind, President Bookwalter, where are we on barriers based on the most recent? Are they going to add a question like that? Are they going to take away? Where are we?
Let me say what let me go over my notes on what to ask the staff for. And Rachel's here, she's just controlling it. So updating the first paragraph and maybe replacing it with a cover statement around, because the first paragraph where it says CBOT needs your help. And what you said, Denise, about this is the first iteration of a board effort to address disaster planning and mitigation with or whatever language we're using, with additional information to follow on efforts to help consumers, or something like that. And then adding a name under 1 and 2, asking people what their name and email is so that we can ask follow-up questions, because we want, if they said yes, especially if they said yes, because we want to know, only if they say yes, really, because you want to know what people are actually doing who are working on it. Adding 3 and 4 stay the same. Adding a comment field to 7. 5 and 6 stay the same. Adding a comment field to 7. A 9 and 10. Anything else to add for 9? And have you experienced barriers to service with regard to disaster planning and mitigation? I'm going to swap those so that this is 10. Sharon?
I just wanted to offer President Bookwalter, as someone with a little bit of experience in survey development, if the board staff and the board committee is so inclined, if you need someone to offer thoughts, I'd be more than happy to help.
Oh, thank you very much. That would be great. All right, so we'll ask, is it okay? We could instruct staff to bring back the survey with those edits, and so we can take another look at it. Okay.
Sounds good.
Next item was a blurb that Heather Martin prepared for our meeting And I actually had some edits on that, and I have to pull them up on my iPad.
Is that this?
Yes, it's the information below is copied from the DCA's Help Center webpage. So the contractor state licensing board blurb is there. And then there's a draft information for the California Board of Occupational Therapy, which is not currently there. And then there's the Architects Board and the Board of Pharmacy on the second page. So basically, the idea is to match the other boards' blurbs with a blurb of our own that would direct people to our website. And the language here talks about during a disaster emergency evacuation, the board's disaster preparedness webpage advises consumers of the benefit of occupational therapy. Oh, they did include my change. It said during this stressful time period, but I thought we should during this time of stress, dislocation, and disruption of daily self-care occupations and routines, which I thought better captured the range of occupational therapy. There are also links to state and local resources. She had health services, housing, and more, and we didn't really I didn't feel like we were prepared to put housing resources on our webpage. It seemed like a stretch. So those are my recommended changes. And it does talk about the board's disaster preparedness webpage also provides valuable information for OTs and OTAs to use in their practice, including sample emergency plans and go kit checklists. Well, when this came to our second meeting and we're like, we don't have anything on go kit checklists. Where do we get that? So, and then resources for OTs and OTAs to use when responding to disaster, including information on caregiver training, access personnel or equipment. We could add mental health there also, and more. And so I went on a hunt to find resources that matched what the expectations would be from such a blurb, and that's where this list came up. Of that's the next section, draft CBOT information and resources. I grouped it into state of California resources, community involvement, volunteer resources, international disaster resources, practitioner resources, and preparedness resources. Some of these kits.
You
I just-
coordinated this for our webpage. That's
I
great.
just started making a table and
That's
going
great.
around. Now, one of the amazing, and actually I was amazed and Mary was amazed, when we started looking at the last section, the preparedness resources in FEMA, they have like 10, 12 languages, these checklists in 10, 12 languages. They have these resources. And Mary's like, we did not have that last time we did disaster. All this stuff was not available last time we worked on disaster preparedness at the board. And so I was amazed because I have a lot of Chinese speaking clients, monolingual Chinese speaking clients and Spanish speaking clients. And they had Vietnamese, Thai, they had all kinds of language groups, materials translated into these languages that occupational therapists could take and with an interpreter or, work with somebody or, on filling out and hand to the client. Fantastic. So I urge you to look at these. I think we could ask if they be organized into a proper format to be a web page or two web pages, one for OTs and one for OT practitioners, one for consumers, and bring that to a future meeting as well. That was the recommendation.
And in terms, that's great. It's great and very helpful. In terms of something that farther down the road, a longer range view, just to go back to the minutes and all the public that voiced about things that we aren't listed in. At the same time, I hope there's a plan either by this board or if a committee takes it up to really make sure that all these groups know about us. Reciprocity. It's really a great word.
So the recommendation of the board of the committee to the board is to accept the minutes that we have approved, which is one set, to ask the staff to further develop the survey based on the board's questions, or board's comments, and to develop a consumer and a practitioner webpage using some of these links for future reference. Do we have a motion? I'll
We
move
have to-
that we.
So we have to do it one by one, right?
No.
Okay.
Do you want me to make the motion?
Maybe the minutes and the other recommendations too?
However you want to break it. I could do all three at once if
Okay.
you want, because your
Go
group
ahead.
discussed it. I make a motion that we approve the minutes. I make a motion that we accept the board comments as indicated by President Bookwalter on his list that will go back to staff. And I further follow up in that same motion that we go ahead and add this table to as a future webpage.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Do we have public comment in the room? Hearing none, do we have any public comment via WebEx moderator?
We are open for public comment via WebEx on the motion. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. For our mobile device users, you may need to click the ... button in order to find your hand. We're going to take just a few seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, please. Let's have a vote.
Board Member Cabrera,
Yes.
Board Member Miller,
Yes.
Board Member Pavlovich,
Yes.
Board Member Wittelsbach,
Yes.
Secretary Doe, yes. Vice President Marcos,
Yes.
and President Bookwalter.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, we're time to break for lunch. We're going to reconvene at, do we need to reconvene at 1:30 to prepare for the 2 o'clock, or is that too much time?
That's usually too much time.
1:45? Let's reconvene at 1:45 for the 2 o'clock hearing, which will be, I'm sorry, we're going to move, that means we're going to move the number 11 to tomorrow. I hope that's okay, Dr. Pavlovich? And, sorry, Denise Miller? Yes. We'll do 11 tomorrow and we'll
Yes.
break for lunch. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting of the Board of Occupational Therapy to get to order following a break for a petition for reinstatement hearing. I'm Richard Bookwalter, President of the Board. Should we do roll? Let's call the roll.
Board Member Cabrera, Board Miller,
Here.
Board Member Pavlovich,
Here.
Board Member Wittelsbach,
Here.
Secretary Doe, here. Vice President Marcos,
Here.
and President Bookwalter.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to defer to the administrative law judge regarding the hearing.
Thank you, President Bookwalter. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patrice Huber. I'm the administrative law judge assigned to hear this matter with the board today. I see Ms. Kennedy is with us, and we did figure out our audio and video issues, and Deputy Attorney General Moshan is also with us with video and audio. That's great. We have a court reporter joining us for this part of the board meeting, Ms. Kennedy. So I just wanted to give you some reminders before we actually begin the hearing. First, I'll give you just a brief format of what today will look like. So the first person who's going to be really speaking is the Deputy Attorney General. She'll be giving an introduction to your case, to your license, and to your petition. And when she's done doing that, you'll have an opportunity to tell the board your side of the story and to tell them why you think your petition should be granted. Like I said, we are joined by a court reporter, and her job is very important, and that is to make sure that there is a full, accurate, and complete record of this proceeding, this petition hearing, and of your testimony. So to help her do that, when you are speaking, let's just make sure that you're doing it loudly, clearly, and slowly, just so she can capture every word. And also let's make sure that we're not interrupting anyone. So if there's somebody speaking, just wait a moment to make sure they're completely done before you start replying. Do you have any questions on anything I've gone over, Ms. Kennedy?
No, it seems very clear.
Okay, thank you. So with that, let's see, Ms. Lindsay, our court reporter, are you ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. We are on the record before the Board of Occupational Therapy, Department of Consumer Affairs, in the matter of the petition for reinstatement of Bonnie Kennedy. The agency number is 710-040-00287, and the OAH case number is 2024-040172. Today is May 2nd, 2024. The time is 2:23 p.m. This is the date and time set for the hearing in this matter, and we are appearing by video conference through WebEx. My name is Patrice Huber. I'm the administrative law judge assigned to this matter to hear it with the board. I am with the Office of Administrative Hearings, or OAH. At this time, I'll take the appearances of the parties, starting with the Deputy Attorney General.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, and members of the board. Dion Moshan, appearing on behalf of the people of California.
Good afternoon, Ms. Moshan. And Ms. Kennedy, I know you're there, but would you please introduce yourself for the record?
My name is Bonnie Kennedy.
Thank you. And Ms. Kennedy, just to confirm, you are representing yourself this afternoon? You do not have an attorney?
That is correct.
Thank you for confirming. And to the board members, I know you've just done a roll call, but for the record to establish a quorum, I'll just take a brief roll call if you wouldn't mind. Please say present or something similar if I call your name. I'll start with President Bookwalter.
Present.
Vice President Morcos.
Here.
Secretary Doe.
Here.
Mr. Cabrera. I don't think I heard a response.
Present.
Oh, thank you. Ms. Miller.
Here.
Dr. Pavlovich.
Here.
And Ms. Whitlisbach.
Here.
Thank you. And that establishes a quorum for our purposes. So see, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to the Deputy Attorney General, Ms. Kennedy, for her presentation. So pay close attention during that. When she's done, again, you'll have your opportunity to talk directly to the board about why you think your petition should be granted. Go ahead, Ms. Moshan.
Thank you, Your Honor. This matter is before the court on Ms. Kennedy's petition for reinstatement filed September 7th, 2023. The matter was originally set for hearing on February 8th, 2024, and was continued till today. Ms. Kennedy's license was revoked by default on November 8th, 2018. After review of her petition packet, it appears that Ms. Kennedy has rectified issues that led to the underlying default that was entered against her, which addressed CEU, Continuing Education Unit issues. Based on the petition, the people have no concerns regarding the reinstatement of Ms. Kennedy's license and would submit to Ms. Kennedy at this time for any statement she may wish to make.
Thank you, Ms. Moshan. And did you want to introduce the petition packet?
Yes, Your Honor, I know Your Honor does have, and I believe the board also has a copy of the petition packet that was submitted by Ms. Kennedy, and we'd request that that be accepted and admitted into evidence.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Kennedy, a question for you. Do you have an objection or a concern with your petition packet being in the evidence as something the board would consider in thinking about your case?
No, that's acceptable.
Thank you. So with that, the petition packet is admitted into the evidence. Does that conclude your presentation, Ms. Moshan? Just want to confirm.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you. So Ms. Kennedy, now it's your turn to talk to the board directly. Before you do that, let me swear you in so that your testimony is under oath. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You may put your hand down. And just for the record, would you please state and spell your full name?
Bonnie, Bonniel Kennedy, Kennedy.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. So before you begin your testimony, just a few notes. So I wanted to remind you that the board does have your petition and its attachments before it. So during your testimony, you don't need to repeat anything that's already in the petition, but this is a good opportunity for you to highlight anything you'd like to or emphasize anything that you think is really important. And just as a reminder, the board is really interested in rehabilitation evidence. And so it's interested in anything that has changed or improved since you were before the board the last time or since the underlying discipline. Does that make sense to you, Ms. Kennedy?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. So whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
I guess the problem for me boils down to I didn't realize there was a difference between the requirements for NBC OT accreditation and CBOT licensure in terms of what was acceptable for CEUs. So I submitted CEUs or PDUs for 2 federal research grants that I worked on for cognitive and physical rehabilitation. And they don't count as PDUs for CBOT. And I didn't know that, and I wasn't able to acquire that information until all of this action started. So since the my license was revoked, I continued to participate in the kinds of continuing education units that are acceptable under the CBOT rules. And I submitted them, they're in the packet. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. So at this time, there will be opportunity for questions for you. So let me start first with Ms. Moshon. Do you have any questions for Ms. Kennedy?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. And I'll turn it over now to the board in case any of the members have questions. I can just go down the line to make sure that we've covered everybody. I'll start with President Bookwalter. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kennedy, for coming before us. I'd like to ask a question about Nova Southeastern University. I see in the packet that you worked for them in 2020 for a period of four months. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that's the dates. I'd have to go back and in the packet, but yes.
Okay. And you were a director of their PhD program?
Oh, no. I was an
Oh, no, you worked.
adjunct.
Oh, adjunct professor. You were an adjunct professor. I'm sorry. I'm misreading.
Yeah, I was an adjunct and I taught an occupational science course, not an occupational therapy course.
Yes. And were they aware that your license had been revoked at that time?
They never asked me about a license for occupational therapy.
Okay, yes, so you did not represent yourself.
One. No.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. And how about Vice President Morcos?
I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary Doe?
My one question for Ms. Kennedy is, I noticed that in our packet that there was a mailing sent to you, and it looks like the address is correct. Was there a reason why it was unclaimed, or did you not receive it? And is that the correct address that's listed in your packet?
My address on the packet is correct. I don't know what didn't get picked up or delivered. I don't know what that would have been. Do you have more clarification?
I don't want to say it out loud, but yeah, we have, in our packet, we have a copy that it looked like it was sent, something was sent to you from the board and it was unclaimed. It was sent by registered mail. So I just wanted to make sure that we still have the correct address for you. And maybe that was, that you missed that packet of information that was sent to you. I just want to clarify that we have that correct address.
But I'm
Just one moment, Miss Kennedy. Miss Kennedy, I'm sorry to interrupt your questions as well, Secretary Joe. Miss Kennedy, your audio is very spotty. I just want to make sure that your testimony is coming across clear in the record. So would you please, can we do a quick mic check and just make sure your microphone is close to your mouth?
This is the moderator. There seems to be a bandwidth issue. The number one remedy I have for that might be to turn off video.
We can try that if the board is amenable to that. President Bookwalter, I'll leave it to you.
We're amenable to that. We have a closed captioning, so we can also read the testimony. Or would
Thank
you rather
you.
see her face and read the testimony?
Was that question directed to me, President Bookwalter?
I'm sorry. I was asking a board member. We were having I apologize. I feel like I misinterpreted a comment from another board member. So we could watch the video and read the transcript as it appears on our screen, and then we wouldn't have to worry about the audio. Are you able to see the audio transcript as well, Your Honor?
I believe I can. I'm not currently using it. I'm more concerned about the court reporter who's having to rely on what she can hear.
So perhaps we can dispense with video if that's a bandwidth issue, and just have audio connection.
Why don't we give that a try? Ms. Kennedy, or perhaps Mr. Moderator, would you please assist Ms. Kennedy in turning off her video?
This is the moderator. That's something that she's going to have to turn off herself. In the at the bottom toolbar, it should say stop video. Okay.
It appears Ms. Kennedy has been able to do that. Ms. Kennedy, can we do a quick mic check, please? Can you say
yes,
hello?
can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, thank you. That is coming across very clearly. Again, I apologize for the interruption. Secretary Doe, please go ahead with your question.
No, I was just wanting a clarification to make sure that we have the correct address and that that when we send communication to you, that you will receive it.
Yes, I am at 822 Arroyo Drive, South Pasadena, California, 9/10/30.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Secretary Doe? All right, Mr. Cabrera, any questions?
Your Honor, not at this moment.
Thank you. And Ms. Miller, any questions?
Yes, I have 2 points of clarification, just in terms of the packet. The first question is back in relation to the employment by Nova Southeastern University. Was that an on-site position or was that a Zoom adjunct position?
Both.
Was it required that you have a California license to teach at Nova Southeastern University?
No.
Okay. And then lastly, is it clear to you now, recognizing the difference between NBCOT as their 36 requirements and the license board as our 24?
Yes.
I just went through my renewing my license as well, Ms. Kennedy. So I asked that question because I do recognize how this could happen, but I want to make sure it's clear to you now.
Yes, I've had several opportunities to reread the requirements of CBOT, and I do see the differences. between that and NBCOT. They're subtle, but they're there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Pavlovich, any questions for Ms. Kennedy?
I do. Thank you, Ms. Kennedy, for coming before the board and having a conversation with us. I have a couple or several questions. Again, I'm not sure of the law in Florida when you taught at Nova Southwestern University, but I just want to make sure that you understand in the state of California, I know, well, let me back up. Post-professional programs usually aren't under accreditation. So there's not a regulating body for post-professional programs. But in California, whether you're a practitioner or an educator, you do have to have an active license to teach. It is considered, we just had this conversation, it is considered occupational therapy practice. So just, that's probably more of a comment. In California, just to be sure, if you're an educator, even in a post-professional program that doesn't require accreditation, you do require an active license to be teaching. That's one point. And then my second point, can you clarify for me how long you've had your license or prior to this event in the state of California?
My license was initially granted, I believe, in 2009. And then it stopped in 2018, but I can double check.
Okay, no, just a rough. I was trying to do the math and how, and I could see how this could happen, but seeing that you had your license in California for so long, and you've had to do continuing education, I was just kind of a little puzzled at why the discrepancy or the non-acknowledgement between NBCOT and CBOT just came now versus, you've had your license since 2009 and then we had this event. Can you speak to that? Because normally we'll catch it on the first round, or someone will catch it and say, oh my gosh, these don't line up, NBCOT and CBOT, because 2009 to the time of the incident's quite a long time to have not caught the difference between NBCOT and CBOT.
Right. It has to do with a job change that I had. And I had the opportunity to win several federal research grants during that time. And so at, 2009, I didn't have those grants, so I wouldn't have claimed them as continuing education under NBCOT or under CBOT. And then I changed jobs. I was chief science officer at Blue Marble Rehabilitation, and they build software for balance problems and cognitive rehabilitation problems. And so I won those grants while I was there, and I just submitted them as PDUs to both NBCOT and CBOT.
Okay, and so, okay. I'm thinking, so the awareness didn't come till after you submitted different types of PDUs for other than grants?
Right. I was just using the standard, conference presentations and things like that. So the grants were a new opportunity.
Okay. I think that's it. Thank you, Mrs. Kennedy.
Welcome.
Thank you. And Ms. Whitlisbach, any questions for Ms. Kennedy?
Yes. So, Ms. Kennedy, you said earlier in your testimony, I didn't know that, and I want, hold on, I can't remember writing. Okay, you said that I didn't know that, and I wasn't able to have that information. You were referring to the continuing education requirements for California. So one comment is that information has always been available through the board. I'll just say that as a general, that information has always been available. So maybe what you meant was you didn't know how to access it. So I just want to make sure, because the law is always changing. we're always adding things to it, changing it. So if it were to change in the future, perhaps we would change our continuing education requirements. I know that you know our current continuing education requirements, but just want to make sure that you know like where to find this information and how to access it. So could you maybe tell me
Right.
where you would look for it?
Yes, I would look for that information on the CBOT website. It's clearly spelled out over a couple of pages of bullet points and lists.
Perfect. Okay, good, great. Thank you. That's
Thank
all I
you.
have. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. And just in case any of those questions jogged any further questions from any members of the board, please let me know. And this is the time to ask those questions.
Your Honor, this is Beata Marcos. I just have one follow-up question. I'm curious, Ms. Kennedy, what happened after your 2019 license? They were revoked. I mean, your license was revoked and until September of 2023. You didn't work at all. Why didn't you apply for it sooner or try to reinstate it sooner?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I didn't work at all, and I didn't apply to have it reinstated earlier because I was told I had to wait at least 3 years. So that would have been like 2021 or 2022. And I, during COVID, wasn't anxious to go back to the clinic, and I had my knee replaced. I used that time for my own rehab for my knee. And then in 2023, I decided to file the paperwork to get the petition to try to get my license back after COVID was over and my knee is back to normal.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from any members of the board? Okay, I didn't hear any. All right, so at this time, there is opportunity for closing remarks if you have any. I know, Ms. Mouchon, you don't typically take a position, although I may have heard one, so I'll leave it to you. Do you have any closing remarks in this case?
Your Honor, as I stated earlier, we've reviewed the packet, and based on Ms. Kennedy's testimony, the people are satisfied that she would be appropriate to be relicensed. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Kennedy, any closing remarks at this time?
No, but I have a question, and this might not be the right time to ask the question.
Well, go ahead and ask it and we can see.
Okay, so I haven't started applying for jobs yet or doing continuing education over the last few months because I thought that I needed to communicate with somebody who was going to supervise my my probationary period. And so I'm wondering, can I go ahead and take like CPR and BLS, the things that are needed to apply for jobs?
Well, so Ms. Kennedy, I am not able to give you any advice on that. And so you may want to conduct your own research or consult an attorney on what your options are while your petition is pending, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other closing remarks?
No, thank you for your time.
Okay, well, thank you. So I'm going to ask in a moment, Ms. Kennedy, whether the matter is submitted. That's a term of art, so let me explain what it means first before I ask the question. When I ask you if the matter is submitted, what I'm asking is, do you feel that you've had a full opportunity to present the evidence that you have in support of your petition and to make any arguments you'd like to make on your own behalf? Does that explanation make sense to you, Ms. Kennedy?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the question now. Is the matter submitted?
Yes, it is.
And Ms. Mouchon?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you. So the matter is submitted, the record is closed. And Ms. Kennedy, the board will convene in a closed session to discuss your case. So you will not be receiving the board's decision on your petition today, but you will receive its written decision in a few months. If you have any questions on the timeframes, the timelines, just contact the board, probably the phone number, and you might get some information on where that is. But you'll have a few months to wait until you find out what ultimately happens with your petition. Does that make sense, Ms. Kennedy?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we are off the record. But don't sign off just yet. Let me just check with our court reporter to see whether there are any spellings or clarification she needs. Ms. Lindsay?
Hi, Your Honor. I don't believe I need anything. Is there anywhere I can get the spellings of the board members if a transcript is ever needed?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
you
That is on the board website. So that I may be able to send that to you as well.
Okay.
But before you leave, Miss Lindsay, can I please get the end time and the page number?
Yeah, I have 248 as the end time, and I have 21 pages.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is the moderator. I also have board member spellings on the screen now.
I just took a screenshot with my phone. So it's like, I think I have them.
Thank you, everyone. And at this time, I'll turn it back over to President Bookwalter.
Thank you, Judge Huber, Deputy Attorney General Moshana, and Ms. Kennedy. I'd like to bring this open session of the Board of OT to a closed, move into closed session. We're going to adjourn the open session and open a closed session. We will deliberate on this case in closed session, and then we will reconvene after some of this and some other disciplinary matters that are only suitable for a closed session. We'll reopen briefly at the end of our deliberations, go into open session only to close again. So anyone who's participating in this meeting who is not involved in the closed session is asked to thank you for joining us. Please let us go, and we'll see you tomorrow at 9 if you would like to join us for that meeting.